My son laughed the moment I stepped into his company lobby. I was wearing my old navy dress, a faded coat, and shoes I had polished myself that morning. Ethan looked me up and down in front of his employees, then smirked. "Mom, do you have any idea how embarrassing this is?" Vanessa covered her mouth, but I saw her smile. A few people turned away. Others whispered. I stood beneath the shining company logo, holding the small gift I had brought for my son, and felt something inside me quietly break. But Ethan didn't know the truth. That company he worshipped so much had never truly belonged to him. If your own child humiliated you like that, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. And if this story touches your heart, please subscribe, and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I lived in a small, white house on the edge of Dayton, Ohio, the kind of house people drove past without noticing. The paint on the porch railing had started to peel. The kitchen floor creaked near the sink. In winter, cold air slipped through the old windows, no matter how many towels I tucked beneath the frames. But it was clean. It was quiet. And every corner of it held a memory. My name is Leila Alexander. I was 68 years old, a widow, and according to my son, I had never learned how to look successful. I still clipped coupons from the Sunday paper. I still bought my coats from clearance racks. I still mended socks instead of throwing them away. If a lamp stopped working, I fixed the wire. If a chair leg wobbled, I tightened the screw myself. I had lived too many years counting pennies to start throwing dollars around just because I could. That was something Ethan never understood. To him, money was supposed to shine. To me, money was supposed to protect. My son, Ethan Alexander, lived in a glass penthouse in Manhattan and ran Alexander Global Solutions, a company people praised in business magazines. His face appeared on conference banners, investor brochures, and glossy interviews where he talked about vision, discipline, and legacy. He had my husband's last name, Robert's sharp jawline, and my stubbornness. But somewhere along the way, he had lost the tenderness he used to carry. When Ethan was little, he used to hold my hand so tightly crossing the street that my fingers would ache. He used to fall asleep at the kitchen table while I folded laundry after midnight. Sometimes when I came home from my second shift at the diner, he would wake up just enough to whisper, "Mom, did you eat?" Most nights I lied. "Yes, sweetheart, I ate." The truth was, after Robert died, there were weeks when I stretched one pot of soup for 4 days. I worked breakfast shifts, cleaned offices at night, and sewed hems for neighbors on weekends. I learned how to smile with tired eyes because Ethan was watching me, and I never wanted him to feel poor even when we were. Robert had been gone only 6 months when the medical bills nearly swallowed us. Ethan was 12 then. Too young to understand why I sold my wedding bracelet, but old enough to notice the pale mark it left on my wrist. "Where did your bracelet go?" he asked one morning. I kissed the top of his head and said I put it somewhere safe. In a way, that was true. I put it into his school tuition. I put it into groceries. I put it into keeping the lights on. Years later, when Ethan got accepted into college, I cried in the parking lot of a grocery store because I didn't want him to see how afraid I was. Tuition books housing everything cost more than I had. But somehow, with extra shifts, loans, and the quiet help Robert had prepared before his death, Ethan went, and he promised me he would never forget. "Someday, Mom," he said, hugging me before freshman orientation, "I'm going to take care of you. You'll never have to work again." I believed him. A mother believes many things when they come from the mouth of her child. For a while, Ethan did call. Every Sunday evening, like clockwork. He told me about classes, internships, his first job, his first promotion. I kept every photo he sent me. I framed his graduation picture and placed it on the mantel right beside Robert's. Then the calls became shorter. Then they became monthly. Then they became text messages. "Busy week, Mom. Talk soon. Board meeting. We'll call later. Traveling." Hope you're good. I was always good because I didn't want to be a burden. When he married Vanessa, I tried to welcome her with an open heart. She was beautiful in the polished way expensive women often are. Smooth hair, perfect nails, a smile that looked practiced in mirrors. At the wedding, she kissed my cheek lightly and said, "We're so happy you could make it, Lila." Not Mom. Not even Mrs. Alexander. Just Lila. I told myself not to be sensitive, but I noticed things. I noticed how Vanessa's eyes moved over my dress, lingering on the sleeves I had altered myself. I noticed how she guided photographers away from me. I noticed how Ethan introduced her parents to investors, board members, and friends from New York, while I was placed at a table near the back, with distant cousins and people I barely knew. Still, I smiled. That was my son's wedding day. I would not stain it with hurt. After that, Ethan changed faster. He stopped inviting me to company dinners. When I asked about visiting New York, he said the city was exhausting and I wouldn't enjoy it. When I mailed homemade cookies to his office, Vanessa later told me in a voice sweet enough to cut skin that executives don't usually receive food in reused tins. I laughed softly when she said it, pretending I didn't understand the insult. But I understood. I understood every word people thought old mothers were too simple to catch. One Thanksgiving, Ethan and Vanessa came to Ohio for less than 3 hours. Vanessa kept her coat on inside the house. Ethan stood in my kitchen looking around like he had entered a museum of something he had escaped. "You still have this table?" he asked. His voice wasn't warm with memory. It was embarrassed. "This table raised you," I said gently. He gave a short laugh. "Mom, sometimes you say things like that, and it sounds so dramatic." Vanessa smiled into her coffee. I looked down at my hands. They were older now, the veins more visible, the knuckles swollen from years of work. Those hands had packed his lunches, signed his school forms, held his fevered forehead, scrubbed floors, folded uniforms, written checks I wasn't sure would clear. Dramatic? No. Just true. But I didn't argue. That was another thing mothers learn. Silence can keep a visit from turning into a goodbye. For years I let Ethan believe I was just a simple old woman living on careful habits and memories. I let him believe the company was entirely his world, his kingdom, his achievement. I never corrected him when he spoke about ownership, as if the name Alexander belonged only to him. Robert and I had made decisions long before Ethan was old enough to understand them. Decisions involving shares, trusts, signatures, and protections. Robert had been a quiet man, but not a foolish one. Before he died, he made sure certain things could not be taken wasted or used by a young man before he had the character to carry them. Those documents were locked in a metal box beneath my bed. I rarely opened it, not because I forgot what was inside, because I hoped I would never need to use it. Then one gray afternoon in early October, I walked back from the mailbox with a stack of bills, grocery coupons, and a thick cream-colored envelope. The return address made my breath catch. Alexander Global Solutions. For a moment, I simply stood on the porch, the wind tugging at the edge of my faded cardigan. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was an invitation printed on heavy paper. The company was celebrating its 20th anniversary in New York City. There would be investors, board members, executives, and press. And at the bottom, in formal lettering, was my name, Mrs. Lila Alexander. I read it 3 times. Then I sat down on the porch step and pressed the invitation against my chest. Maybe Ethan wanted me there. Maybe after all those years of distance he had remembered. Maybe my son was finally ready to stand beside his mother without shame. For the first time in a long while, I let myself hope. And hope at my age can be a dangerous thing. For the next 2 days, I carried that invitation around my house like it was something fragile. I placed it on the kitchen table while I made tea. I moved it to the mantel beside Robert's photograph. At night, before turning off the lamp, I read it again, tracing my name with one finger. Mrs. Lila Alexander. It had been a long time since anything from Ethan's world included me so formally, so publicly. I knew better than to let my heart run too far ahead. But mothers are foolish in one particular way. We can be hurt 100 times, and still one small gesture from our child can make us believe healing is possible. I started preparing as if I had been invited to the White House. The first thing I did was open the cedar chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were things I rarely touched anymore. Robert's old wool scarf, Ethan's baby blanket, a stack of birthday cards tied with ribbon, and a navy dress folded carefully in tissue paper. It was not expensive. It had never been expensive. But Robert loved that dress. "You look like yourself in that one," he once told me, smiling from across our bedroom while I pinned my hair. Strong, graceful, like a woman who doesn't need diamonds to be seen. I held the dress against my chest and closed my eyes. "Oh, Robert," I whispered, "I wish you were here to tell me if I'm being foolish." The house answered with silence. I spent the morning cleaning my shoes, even though the leather had softened and creased with age. I polished them until I could see a faint reflection of my face. Then I took my faded coat from the closet and brushed it carefully. One button was loose, so I sewed it tighter with navy thread. It was strange how much hope could live inside such small tasks. That afternoon, I took the bus downtown to buy Ethan a gift. I could have ordered something expensive. I could have sent a watch, a rare bottle of wine, a framed piece of art. But Ethan already had expensive things. His life was full of them. I wanted to give him something that remembered who he used to be. At a small antique shop near the courthouse, I found a silver compass in a glass case. It was old, but beautifully kept, with tiny scratches along the lid. When the owner opened it for me, the needle trembled, then settled north. My husband used to say, "A man needs direction more than admiration," I told the shopkeeper. She smiled. "Sounds like he was wise." He was. I bought the compass and asked her to wrap it in brown paper. On the card, I wrote only one sentence. "For when success gets loud, remember where home is." I sat on the bus ride back with the package in my lap, imagining Ethan opening it. Maybe he would laugh softly. Maybe he would remember the boy who once asked Robert how sailors found their way home. Maybe for just one moment, my son would look at me without impatience. That evening, Ethan called. His name appeared on my phone, and my heart lifted before I could stop it. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. "Mom," he replied quickly. "You got the invitation right." "Yes, it's beautiful." "Good. The event starts at 7, but you should be there by 6:30. Security will have your name. I'll be there." There was a pause, but not the warm kind. I heard voices in the background glasses clinking, someone laughing. "And Mom?" "Yes. This is a formal event. Press may be there, investors too. I understand. I'm just saying, it's important." The words were harmless by themselves, but his tone made them heavy. "I know how to behave at an event, Ethan," I said gently. He sighed. That's not what I meant, but it was exactly what he meant. I looked down at the wrapped compass on the table. "I'm looking forward to seeing you." "Right. Me too. I have to go. Vanessa and I are at dinner with the Whitmore group." Before I could say goodbye, the line went dead. I sat still for a while, phone in hand. Then not 10 minutes later, Vanessa called. That surprised me. Vanessa almost never called unless she needed something corrected, canceled, or kept quiet. "Hello, Vanessa," I said. "Lila," she said, her voice smooth as polished marble. I just wanted to make sure you're feeling prepared for Saturday. Prepared. Not excited, not welcomed. Prepared. That's kind of you, I said. I think I'll manage. A small laugh floated through the phone. Of course. It's just that this is a very high-profile evening for Ethan. There will be important people there. Board members, investors, possibly media. So Ethan mentioned. Yes? Well, she paused. I know you're very comfortable with your own style, and that's lovely in Ohio. But New York can be unforgiving. I looked toward the hallway mirror where my reflection stood in an old cardigan and house slippers. I'm not going to New York to impress anyone, I said. Another pause. No, but Ethan is, Vanessa replied. And as his mother, I'm sure you want to support him. There it was, the little blade wrapped in silk. I kept my voice calm. I have supported Ethan all his life. I'm sure you have, she said, though her tone told me she had no interest in the truth of that sentence. Just, maybe avoid telling too many old stories. You know about hard times. People can misunderstand. Misunderstand what Ethan has worked very hard to build a certain image. We don't want people thinking he came from... She stopped herself. From struggle. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because the woman living off the name Alexander was ashamed of the very struggle that made the name worth anything. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Wonderful. We'll see you Saturday. When she hung up, the house felt colder. I walked to the mantel and looked at Robert's photograph. He was standing beside a young Ethan in that picture, both of them holding fishing rods, both smiling into the sun. Robert had one hand on Ethan's shoulder, like he was anchoring him to the earth. They're ashamed of where they came from, I whispered. Robert's smile did not change. Later that night, just as I was folding the navy dress into a garment bag, my phone rang again. This time, the screen showed a name I had not seen in months. Daniel Brooks. My hand tightened around the phone before I answered. Daniel Leela, he said, and his voice carried the careful weight of a man who never spoke without purpose. I heard you received the invitation. I did. Are you planning to attend? Yes. Silence stretched between us. Then Daniel said, Are you sure you're ready to face him in that building? I sat slowly on the edge of my bed. That building. Not the event, not the company. The building. Daniel knew better than anyone what those words meant. I'm going as his mother, I said. I understand, he replied. But some truths have a way of walking into the room whether we invite them or not. My eyes moved toward the closet. Behind a row of old coats beneath a folded quilt was the locked metal box Robert had left me. Inside were documents Ethan had never seen. Documents with signatures, seals, shares trust agreements, and instructions written in Robert's firm, slanted handwriting. For years, Daniel had advised me to be ready. For years, I had refused. He's not ready, I said quietly. Daniel exhaled. Lila, with respect, he may never be ready if no one lets him face himself. The words hurt because they were true. I stood and opened the closet. My knees ached as I bent down and pulled the metal box from beneath the quilt. Dust clung to the lid. The small brass lock caught the lamplight. For a moment, I could almost hear Robert's voice. Protect him, Lila, but don't protect him from becoming a man. I don't want to shame my son, I whispered. No, Daniel said softly, but you may need to stop letting him shame you. I closed my eyes. In my mind, I saw Ethan as a little boy with scraped knees running into my arms. Then I saw him as a grown man in a tailored suit, looking at my old coat like it was a stain on his life. I'll come to New York, I said at last. But the documents stay here. For now, I rested my hand on the cold metal box. For now. After we hung up, I sat alone in my bedroom for a long time. The navy dress hung on the closet door. The compass waited on the table. The invitation lay beside Robert's photograph. Hope was still there, but now beneath it, something else had begun to stir. Not anger. Not yet. Something quieter. The feeling a woman gets when she has been underestimated for too long. On Saturday morning, I woke before sunrise. For a few minutes, I lay still beneath my quilt, listening to the old house breathe around me. The pipes clicked softly in the walls. A truck passed somewhere down the road. Outside my bedroom window, the sky was still gray, not quite morning yet. I turned my head and looked at the navy dress hanging on the closet door. It looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe I had simply carried too many years since the last time I wore it. I got out of bed slowly, my knees stiff, my back aching. In that familiar way age reminds you it has moved in permanently. I made coffee, toasted one slice of bread, and stood at the kitchen counter instead of sitting down. I was too nervous to sit. The invitation lay beside my cup. Alexander Global Solutions, 20th Anniversary, Gala, New York City. I read the words again and tried to calm the flutter in my chest. This is just dinner, I whispered to myself. But it wasn't. It was my son's world. A world of glass towers, private cars, polished shoes, and people who measured worth by what glittered. I had never belonged there, not because I couldn't, but because I had never wanted to live pretending money made a person taller. After breakfast, I took my time getting ready. I bathed, brushed my silver hair back into a soft twist, and pinned it carefully. My hands shook a little as I opened the garment bag. The navy dress slipped over my arms with a whisper of old fabric. It was plain, with long sleeves and a modest neckline. There was a tiny repair near the hem where I had once caught it on a chair. I ran my thumb over the stitch and smiled sadly. Robert had noticed that repair the night I made it. You fixed it so neatly, he had said. I didn't want to throw it away. He had taken my hand and kissed my knuckles. That's what I love about you, Lila. You know the value of things people are too quick to discard. I stood in front of the mirror now, hearing his voice as clearly as if he were behind me. The woman looking back at me was not glamorous. Her face had lines. Her hands were worn. Her dress was old. But her eyes were steady. I added a small pair of pearl earrings Robert had given me on our 10th anniversary. They were not real pearls. He had apologized when he gave them to me, embarrassed that he couldn't afford better. I had worn them proudly ever since. By 10 o'clock, Ethan's black SUV pulled into my driveway. I saw it through the front window and felt my heart lift before fear pulled it back down. Ethan stepped out first, dressed in a dark tailored suit, his hair perfect, his phone already in his hand. Vanessa followed, wearing sunglasses, though the sky was cloudy, her cream coat hanging from her shoulders, like she had stepped out of a magazine. I opened the door before they knocked. "Hi, sweetheart," I said. Ethan looked up. For half a second, I saw my little boy. Then his eyes moved over me. The warmth disappeared. "Mom," he said carefully, "is that what you're wearing?" I glanced down at my dress. "Yes, I thought it was appropriate." Vanessa removed her sunglasses slowly. Her smile was thin. "Oh, Lila, just 2 words, but they carried a whole room of judgment." I stepped back to let them in. "Would you like coffee before we go?" "No," Ethan said too quickly. "We're already behind schedule." "We're not behind," Vanessa corrected softly, still staring at my dress. "But we may need to make a stop." I knew what she meant before she said it. "There's a boutique near the highway," she continued. "Very tasteful. We could find you something more suitable. Suitable for whom I asked. Vanessa blinked. Ethan sighed. Mom, don't make this difficult. I'm not trying to. This isn't a church luncheon in Ohio, he said. This is a major corporate event in Manhattan. There will be press investors, people who matter. People who matter. I felt the words land quiet and sharp. I see, I said. Ethan rubbed his forehead. I just need tonight to go smoothly, and my dress will prevent that. Vanessa gave a soft laugh. It's not only the dress. It's the overall impression. Ethan has worked very hard to build a certain image. I looked at my son. And I don't fit that image? He didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. I turned toward the table and picked up the small wrapped compass. I brought you something. Ethan glanced at it distracted. Mom, you didn't have to. I wanted to. He took it, but he didn't open it. He just handed it to Vanessa, who slipped it into her designer bag, as if it were an inconvenience. Something inside me tightened. Not because of the gift, because of the carelessness. That compass had taken me an hour to choose and a lifetime to mean. We locked the house and walked to the SUV. Ethan opened the rear door for me, then paused, as if remembering manners cost him something. I climbed in, smoothing my dress over my knees. The ride to the airport was quiet at first. I watched Ohio pass by through the tinted window gas stations, bare trees, small houses, fields, resting under a pale sky. Places Ethan had once known. Places he now spoke of like a childhood illness he had recovered from. Vanessa typed on her phone. Ethan took 2 calls, both filled with words like valuation optics, expansion, and board confidence. His voice changed when he spoke to business people. It became deeper, smoother, more important. When he ended the second call, he turned slightly in his seat. Mom, tonight, I need you to keep things simple. I looked at the back of his head. Simple, yes. If someone asks about you, just say you're proud of me. No long stories. I wasn't planning to give a speech. I know, but sometimes you get sentimental. Vanessa added without looking up, and maybe avoid mentioning the diner work. Some people romanticize struggle, but others see it as instability. Ethan seemed relieved, which hurt more than if he had argued. At the airport, he moved quickly, checking us in, guiding Vanessa through security, speaking to me in short instructions. Put your bag there. Take off your shoes, Mom. No, not that line. This one. I followed quietly. On the plane, I sat by the window while Ethan and Vanessa discussed seating charts for the gala. I heard names I didn't know. Investors, board members, journalists. Charles Whitmore's name came up twice. Charles will be watching everything tonight, Vanessa said. He always watches everything, Ethan replied. That's why I need this family angle to look clean. Family angle. I turned toward the clouds outside. Not mother, not history, not love. An angle. By the time we reached New York, the sun had lowered behind the skyline. The city rose around us in steel and glass, loud and bright and impatient. Ethan's driver took us through traffic toward the hotel, where I would change nothing because there was nothing else to change into. Vanessa tried once more. Lila, I really can have something sent up. A simple black dress, nothing dramatic. I looked at her reflection in the car window. This dress belonged to a happier time in my life. Her expression softened for a fraction of a second, then hardened again. Sentiment doesn't always translate well in public. No, I said quietly. I suppose it doesn't. Ethan checked his watch. Let's not start. I wanted to ask him when I had become something he needed to manage. I wanted to ask if he remembered being 10 years old crying because he had torn his only good shirt before picture day. I had stayed up past midnight sewing it, and the next morning, he hugged me so hard, I nearly dropped the iron. But I said nothing, because the closer we came to his world, the smaller he seemed to want me to become. At the hotel, Ethan gave me one final warning before we entered the ballroom. "Mom," he said, lowering his voice, "please don't wander around. Stay near our table. If anyone important approaches, let me lead the conversation." I looked at him for a long moment. "Do I embarrass you that much?" His jaw tightened. "Don't make this emotional." That was when I understood. He did not want me there as his mother. He wanted me there as proof that he had one. I nodded slowly. "All right, Ethan." He looked relieved again. Vanessa adjusted his tie, smiled at him, and said, "Tonight is too important to let anything go wrong." I followed them toward the ballroom doors, my old shoes soft against the marble floor, my rapt hope already beginning to unravel. And still, somewhere deep inside me, I prayed my son would remember who I was before the night was over. The ballroom looked like something from a world I had only seen in magazines. Crystal chandeliers hung above us like frozen rain. Tall windows reflected the Manhattan skyline, each building glittering against the darkening sky. White roses filled silver vases on every table. Waiters moved silently between guests with trays of champagne, and everywhere I looked, people were polished, expensive, and certain they belonged. I stood just inside the entrance, holding my small purse with both hands. For a moment, I forgot to breathe. Ethan stepped forward as if the room had been waiting for him. His shoulders straightened. His smile appeared instantly wide and confident, the kind of smile he never used at my kitchen table anymore. "Ethan," a man called from across the room. My son lifted one hand. "Martin, good to see you." Vanessa slipped her arm through his, and together they moved into the crowd like royalty entering court. I followed a few steps behind, not beside them. Behind. That difference was small, but I felt it. At first, I tried to stay close. Ethan introduced Vanessa to investors, to board members, to people whose names I forgot as soon as I heard them because my nerves were too loud. But each time I stepped near Vanessa, shifted slightly, placing her body between me and the conversation. Once Ethan glanced back and said, "Mom, why don't you go find our table? We'll be right there." His voice was pleasant. His eyes were not. So I nodded and walked away. The table cards were arranged near the center of the room. I found my name printed in elegant black lettering, Mrs. Leela Alexander. For some reason, seeing it there made my throat tighten. I touched the card gently, then sat down. Around me, people laughed and spoke in smooth, confident voices. They discussed vacation homes, market forecasts, private schools, charity boards, and restaurants where a single dinner probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. No one spoke to me. I was used to being invisible in certain rooms. Women my age often are. People look past us as if our stories ended the moment our hair turned gray. But that night, invisibility felt different. It felt arranged. After a few minutes, I stood and walked toward the side of the ballroom where framed photographs displayed the company's history. There were pictures of office openings, product launches, ribbon cuttings, leadership retreats. Ethan appeared in many of them, smiling in suits, shaking hands, standing in front of banners with the Alexander name behind him. I stopped at an older photograph near the end. It showed the first small office building the company had used 20 years earlier. I knew that building. Robert had taken me there once when the walls still smelled of paint and the desks were secondhand. He had been so proud that day, though he tried to hide it. This could become something real, he had told me. "It already is," I said. He squeezed my hand. "Only because you believed before anyone else did." I stared at that photograph until my eyes blurred. "Ma'am," I turned. A young woman in a black staff uniform stood beside me holding a tray of water glasses. She had kind eyes and a nervous smile. "Are you all right?" she asked. "Can I get you anything?" The kindness surprised me so much I nearly cried. "No thank you, sweetheart," I said. "I'm fine." She glanced at my name tag. "Mrs. Alexander?" "Yes?" Her expression changed with polite recognition. "Oh, you're Mr. Alexander's mother, I am." "That must be wonderful," she said. "You must be very proud." I looked across the room at Ethan, surrounded by men in dark suits and women in diamonds. "Yes," I said softly. "I have been." Before she could answer, Ethan's voice came from behind me. "Mom!" I turned. He was walking toward us quickly, Vanessa beside him. His smile was still on his face, but now it looked tight, stretched over irritation. "What are you doing over here?" he asked. I was looking at the photographs. His eyes flicked to the young employee, then to my dress, then to the small cluster of guests nearby who had begun to notice us. "You shouldn't be standing by the service area," he said under his breath. I didn't realize I was. Vanessa gave a light laugh, the kind meant to make cruelty sound harmless. "Lila, this is why we said to stay near the table?" The young employee lowered her eyes and stepped away. I felt heat rise to my face. "I was only looking at the company history," I said. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mom, tonight is not the time to wander around like you're on a museum tour." A man nearby chuckled softly. I heard it. So did Ethan. And something in him shifted. He seemed to realize he had an audience. Instead of softening, he performed. He gave a short laugh and turned slightly toward the guests. "My mother still thinks every event is a church basement dinner," he said. A few people smiled uncertainly. Vanessa touched his arm, but she did not stop him. Ethan looked me up and down. His eyes paused on my old navy dress, my faded coat folded over my arm, my polished but worn shoes. "Mom," he said louder. "Now you look like you wandered in from a thrift store." The words hit the room before they hit me. Then came the laughter. Not loud from everyone, not cruel from every mouth, but enough. Enough to make my skin feel too thin. Enough to make the chandelier light seem suddenly harsh. Enough to make me feel for one terrible second like the poor young widow I had once been standing in a grocery line praying my card would not decline. I gripped my purse tighter. "Ethan," I whispered, but he kept going. Maybe he was embarrassed. Maybe he was nervous. Maybe he thought making me small would make him look bigger. "My mother has never believed in presentation," he said, smiling at the guests as if this were charming. "She still dresses like we're broke." More laughter. Vanessa looked down, hiding her smile behind her champagne glass. That hurt almost as much as Ethan's words, because she knew. She knew he was humiliating me, and she allowed it. I looked at my son, really looked at him. The expensive suit, the shining watch, the perfect haircut. The man who had once cried into my apron because boys at school teased him for wearing discount sneakers. I had held him then. I had told him his worth was not in his shoes. And now he was measuring mine by the same thing. A few feet away, someone lifted a phone. I saw the screen pointed toward us. Another person turned their head, whispering to a woman beside him. The young employee who had offered me water stood frozen near the wall, her face full of pity. Pity. I had survived hunger, debt, grief, widowhood, and loneliness. But my son's shame brought me pity. That nearly broke me. I wanted to speak. I wanted to say, "Do you know what this dress means? Do you know what these hands paid for? Do you know whose name built the floor beneath your feet?" But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I stood still beneath the golden light and let the silence grow around me. Ethan seemed uncomfortable with that silence. "Come on, Mom," he said, lowering his voice again. "Don't look like that. It was a joke." A joke. People often call cruelty a joke when they realize the wound is visible. I nodded once, though, not because I agreed. "I see," I said. My voice was calm. Too calm, perhaps. For the first time that evening, Ethan's confidence flickered. Before he could say anything else, a deep voice came from behind him. "Mrs. Alexander." The room seemed to shift. Ethan turned. An older man in a charcoal suit stood a few steps away. Tall, silver-haired, dignified. I recognized him immediately, though we had not seen each other in years. Charles Whitmore, chairman of the board. His eyes were not on Ethan. They were on me. And there was no embarrassment in them. Only recognition, respect, and something close to alarm. He stepped forward slowly, as if approaching someone important enough to silence a room. "Mrs. Alexander?" he said again, warmer this time. "I didn't know you had arrived." Ethan's expression tightened with confusion. Vanessa's smile faded. Charles reached for my hand and held it gently between both of his. "It is an honor to see you here," he said. The people who had laughed moments earlier went quiet. Monica Reed, the head of Human Resources, stood near the bar, watching everything. I saw her eyes move from Charles's respectful posture to Ethan's stunned face, then back to me. She understood immediately that something was wrong. Ethan gave a nervous laugh. "Charles, you know my mother." Charles did not look amused. His gaze stayed on me for one more second, before he turned to my son. "Ethan," he said quietly, "do you have any idea who you just humiliated?" The ballroom noise seemed to fall away. My son stared at him, confused and irritated. I lowered my eyes to the floor, feeling the old navy fabric against my knees, the weight of years pressing against my heart. And for the first time that night, I knew the truth could not stay hidden much longer. For one long second, nobody moved. Charles Whitmore still held my hand, with both of his standing in front of me, as if I were not an old woman in a faded dress, but someone whose presence mattered. Ethan looked from Charles to me, then back again. "What do you mean?" my son asked, his voice low. "She's my mother." Charles's face remained calm, but there was steel beneath it. "Yes, Ethan, she is." The way he said it made Ethan's jaw tighten. Vanessa stepped closer, her smile returning in a smaller, more cautious shape. "Charles, I think there's been a misunderstanding." Ethan was only joking with Lila. Charles looked at her, not rudely, worse, coldly. "I heard enough to understand the nature of the joke," he said. Vanessa's cheeks colored. I gently pulled my hand from Charles's. "Please," I said softly. "Not here." Charles turned back to me at once. "Of course, Mrs. Alexander. Mrs. Alexander. Not Lila. Not Ethan's mother. Mrs. Alexander." The room seemed to hear the difference. Ethan heard it too. His eyes narrowed. "Charles, why are you addressing her like that?" Before Charles could answer, Daniel Brooks appeared near the edge of the crowd. He had always been a quiet man, tall and lean, with silver-rimmed glasses, and a way of entering a room without asking permission. He wore a dark suit and carried a leather folder beneath one arm. When I saw him, my stomach tightened. Daniel was not supposed to be there. Or maybe somewhere deep down I had known he would be? "Lila," he said gently. "Daniel." Ethan turned sharply. "You know him too?" Daniel's eyes rested on Ethan with a sadness that felt older than the evening. "I've known your family for nearly 30 years. "My family," Ethan repeated. "You mean my mother. I mean your family," Daniel said. Vanessa shifted beside Ethan. "Ethan, Maybe we should not do this in front of everyone. That was the first sensible thing she had said all night. Charles glanced toward Monica Reed, who had been watching from near the bar. Monica, would you please help redirect the guests to the presentation area? Tell them we'll begin in 10 minutes. Monica nodded immediately. Of course, she moved with professional grace, guiding attention away from us. Music swelled slightly. Waiters began circulating again. Conversations resumed, but not naturally. People still looked over their shoulders. A room that had laughed at me now wanted to know why the chairman of the board looked ready to defend me. Charles leaned closer. Mrs. Alexander, may we speak privately? I looked at Ethan. His face was flushed now, not with shame, but with irritation. He still thought this was about manners, about optics, about some awkward moment that could be smoothed over with a forced apology and a drink. He had no idea the ground beneath him had begun to crack. Yes, I said, privately. Charles led the way through a side door near the stage. Daniel walked beside me. Ethan followed without being invited, Vanessa at his heels. The hallway was quiet compared to the ballroom. Our footsteps echoed against polished marble. At the end, Charles opened the door to a private executive lounge with dark wood walls, leather chairs, and a long conference table. The moment the door closed, Ethan spoke. What is going on? Charles did not answer him. He pulled out a chair for me. I sat down slowly. That seemed to anger Ethan more than anything. The courtesy, the respect. The fact that another powerful man in his company was treating me better than my own son had. Daniel placed his leather folder on the table, but did not open it yet. Vanessa crossed her arms. This is becoming very dramatic. I looked at her. No, Vanessa. What happened in that ballroom was dramatic. This is only overdue. Her mouth closed. Ethan stared at me. Overdue, Mom? What are you talking about? I folded my hands in my lap. The pearls in my ears felt suddenly heavy. Charles took a seat across from me. Daniel remained standing. Ethan Charles said there are matters regarding this company's history that you have never fully understood. Ethan gave a short, disbelieving laugh. I run this company. You operate it, Daniel said. The room went silent. Ethan slowly turned toward him. Excuse me? Daniel opened the folder. My heart gave one painful beat. I had spent years avoiding this moment. Years telling myself Ethan would mature, soften, remember. Years hoping I could protect him from the truth until he was strong enough to receive it. But sometimes protection becomes permission. And I had permitted too much. Daniel slid a document across the table, but Ethan did not touch it. Alexander Global Solutions began under another name, Daniel said. Alexander Strategic Systems, a small regional consulting firm founded with capital secured by your father, Robert Alexander. Ethan's eyes flickered. I know Dad was involved early on. You know a softened version, Charles said. Daniel continued. Robert was not merely involved. He was the principal financial backer during the company's most vulnerable years. When banks refused lending, when early partners walked away, when payroll nearly failed twice, Robert kept the company alive. I remembered those years. Robert at the kitchen table after midnight papers spread before him, one hand pressed to his forehead. Me bringing him coffee. The two of us whispering because Ethan was asleep down the hall. We can still pull out, I had told him once. Robert shook his head. If this works, Lila, it will protect you and Ethan long after I'm gone. I hadn't wanted protection. I had wanted my husband to live. Daniel's voice brought me back. Before Robert's death, he said he transferred his controlling interest into a family trust. Ethan glanced at me. What trust? The Alexander Family Trust, Daniel said. With your mother as trustee and controlling beneficiary. Vanessa's arms dropped to her sides. Ethan stared at Daniel as if the man had spoken another language. "No," he said. Daniel did not flinch. "Yes." Charles leaned forward. "Your mother has held controlling authority over the trust for years. The board has always known." Ethan looked at Charles. "That's impossible." "I'm CEO." "Yes," Charles said. "You are CEO. That is not the same thing as owner." The word landed hard. Owner. Ethan's face changed. Not fully. Not yet. But something in his confidence slipped. He turned to me slowly. "You own part of the company?" I looked at my son, the boy I had raised, the man who had mocked my clothes before strangers. "No," I said quietly. "I control the part that matters." Vanessa gripped the back of a chair. "Why would nobody tell us this?" Daniel's eyes moved to her. Because Robert's instructions were specific. Ethan was to be allowed to build a career without relying on ownership. He was to learn leadership before inheriting influence. Ethan's voice rose. "So you all lied to me?" "No," I said. "We gave you a chance." His eyes flashed. "A chance? You let me work for years thinking I built this on my own." "You did work," I said. "No one is taking that from you. But you did not build alone." The words seemed to offend him more than anything else. That was how far he had drifted. Gratitude now sounded like insult. Charles placed both hands on the table. "Ethan, recent concerns have made this conversation unavoidable." "What concerns?" Daniel removed another set of papers. Excessive discretionary spending charged to executive image campaigns. Pressure placed on senior staff to resign before retirement benefits matured. Internal complaints about age-based remarks. Vendor contracts awarded without proper review. And tonight's incident witnessed by half the leadership team. Vanessa spoke quickly. "Every CEO makes unpopular decisions." "Unpopular is not the same as reckless," Charles replied. Ethan looked at me with betrayal in his eyes, as if I had caused the consequences of his own behavior. "You brought him here?" he asked, nodding at Daniel. "No," I said. "Daniel came because he saw what I refused to see for too long." "And what is that?" My throat tightened. "That my son has begun to confuse power with worth." For the first time, Ethan had no answer. I looked down at my hands. The same hands he had laughed at, though not directly. The hands that had patched his jeans, held his report cards, signed loan forms, packed lunches in paper bags when we couldn't afford new ones. "When your father created that trust, I said he was dying. He knew he would not be here to guide you. He told me to protect the company, but more than that, he told me to protect you from becoming cruel." Ethan looked away. Vanessa whispered, "This is ridiculous." Daniel closed the folder halfway. "What is ridiculous is that Mrs. Alexander was humiliated tonight in a building that exists because of sacrifices you have never bothered to understand." The room went still again. I could hear faint applause from the ballroom muffled through the walls. The gala was continuing without us. The celebration of legacy. The polished story. The beautiful lie. Ethan's face hardened. "If this is true, why stay hidden all these years?" I met his eyes. "Because I wanted you to love me without needing anything from me." That silenced him. For a heartbeat, I saw pain cross his face. Real pain. Then pride covered it again. Charles stood. "We need to convene the board tomorrow morning." Ethan snapped his head toward him. "For what? To review leadership conduct and governance concerns." "You can't be serious." "I am very serious." Ethan looked at me. "Mom?" There was a plea there, but not the one I had waited years to hear. He was not asking if I was hurt. He was asking if I would save him from embarrassment. That difference broke my heart all over again. I stood slowly. "I came tonight hoping to be your mother," I said. Not your enemy, not your judge, just your mother. My voice trembled, but I did not let it fall apart. But you were ashamed of me before people who never paid one bill for you, never sat beside your hospital bed, never went hungry, so you could eat. Ethan swallowed. I stepped toward the door. Tonight, I learned something painful. You do not need to know what I own nearly as much as you need to remember who raised you. No one followed immediately. When I opened the door, the sound of the gala rushed back in. Music, laughter, applause. A celebration built on a truth my son had mocked without knowing it. And as I walked back toward the ballroom, I knew the secret Robert left behind had finally begun to rise from the dark. I did not return to the ballroom as the same woman who had entered it. A few minutes earlier, I had walked beneath those chandeliers, hoping my son would remember me with tenderness. Now, I walked back through the side hallway, with Daniel's words still echoing in my chest. You may need to stop letting him shame you. The music was louder when I stepped inside again. On the stage, a short video played across a massive screen showing the company's milestones, office openings, smiling executives, newspaper headlines, Ethan shaking hands with men who looked powerful enough to believe they owned every room they entered. Guests clapped politely. I stood near the back half hidden beside a column and watched my son's face appear on the screen. Ethan Alexander. Visionary leadership for a new generation. The words glowed beneath his photograph. Visionary, leadership, generation. Beautiful words can hide ugly truths when spoken by the wrong heart. Daniel stood beside me, but said nothing. Charles had remained in the executive lounge for a moment, likely gathering himself before facing the board members scattered throughout the room. I knew him well enough to understand his silence. Charles was a man who measured consequences before he moved. But Ethan was not like that. Ethan moved with pride, first thought second, and apologized only when cornered. I saw him before he saw me. He entered the ballroom from the side door with Vanessa close behind. His face was composed, but his eyes were sharp, searching. When he spotted me near the column, his expression hardened. He crossed the room quickly, not running. Ethan would never run in front of investors, but each step carried anger. "Mom," he said through his teeth when he reached me. "We need to talk." Daniel shifted slightly. "Ethan, this is not the place." My son ignored him. "I wasn't speaking to you." I touched Daniel's sleeve. "It's all right." But it wasn't. Nothing about that night was all right. Ethan leaned closer, lowering his voice. "What are you doing?" I looked at him, standing quietly. "No, you're creating a scene." A sad little laugh almost escaped me. "I created a scene." "You know what I mean." "I'm afraid I don't." His eyes flicked around the room. A few people were watching us again. Monica Reed stood near the stage pretending to review a program while clearly paying attention. Tyler Jensen, Ethan's assistant, hovered near the media table with a tablet in his hand, his face tight with concern. Ethan noticed the eyes too. That only made him angrier. "Come with me," he said. He reached for my arm, not violently, but not gently either. Daniel's voice sharpened. "Ethan," my son stopped, his fingers barely touching my sleeve. "She is my mother." "Yes," Daniel said. "So act like it." For one breath, I thought Ethan might strike him with words. Instead, he turned back to me. "Please," he said, though the word carried no humility. "Hallway. Now." I should have refused, but some part of me still wanted to give him one final chance away from strangers. One final chance to lower his voice, to say he was sorry, to admit that he had been shocked and embarrassed and cruel. So I followed him into the hallway. Vanessa came too, of course. The moment the ballroom doors closed behind us, Ethan turned on me. "Do you have any idea what you just did?" I stared at him. "What I did?" "You let Charles and that lawyer ambush me at my own event. Daniel is not that lawyer. He has protected this family longer than Vanessa has known our name." Vanessa's mouth tightened. "That was unnecessary." "So was laughing at my dress," I said. She looked away. Ethan paced once, then stopped. "This is exactly what I was worried about. You come here, you get emotional, and suddenly everything becomes about old wounds." "Old wounds," I repeated softly. "Yes, old wounds. The past, struggle, Dad, sacrifice, all of it." He rubbed his forehead. "Tonight was supposed to be about the company. It is about the company. No, it's about you now." His words were bitter, and there it was again, the truth beneath his anger. He was not sorry he had hurt me. He was angry that my hurt had become inconvenient. I looked at the man in front of me and tried to find the boy I had loved through fevers, nightmares, report cards, broken hearts, and impossible bills. I could still see traces of him in the shape of his mouth, in the way his left eyebrow lifted when he was defensive, in the restless movement of his hands. But his heart felt far away. "Ethan," I said, "do you understand what happened in there? I understand that you and Daniel have been keeping secrets." "I kept silence because I loved you." He scoffed. "That's a convenient explanation. It is the truth. No, the truth is you let me look like a fool." The hallway seemed to narrow around us. I heard Vanessa inhale sharply, but she did not correct him. I let the words settle. A fool. That was what mattered to him. Not that he had mocked his mother. Not that he had wounded the woman who raised him. Not that his father's legacy had been reduced to a stage backdrop and a press angle. He looked like a fool. I nodded slowly. "I see." Ethan stepped closer. "Do you? Because I don't think you do. I have spent years building credibility in rooms like this. Years proving I belong. And now in one night, people are whispering because my mother shows up looking like he stopped." But I heard the rest. Vanessa heard it too. Like what I asked. Ethan's jaw worked. "That's not what I meant." "Then say what you meant." He looked away. Vanessa stepped in, her voice low and polished. "Lila, this is getting out of hand. Ethan is under enormous pressure. You have to understand appearances matter at this level." "At this level?" I said. "Yes," she replied. "This is not a small-town fundraiser. This is a corporate environment." I turned to her fully. "And in corporate environments, is it acceptable for a man to humiliate his mother?" Her face flushed. "That's not fair." "No," I said. It wasn't. For the first time, Vanessa had no smooth answer. Ethan pointed toward the ballroom. "You need to leave." The words were quiet, but they struck harder than his laughter had. I looked at him carefully. "Are you asking your mother to leave?" His eyes were cold now, but beneath the coldness was panic. Panic that the night was slipping out of his control. Panic that people knew something he did not. Panic that the woman he had treated as decoration might be connected to the foundation beneath his feet. "You're making everything worse," he said. "So yes. I think it would be better if you went back to the hotel. I came here because you invited me." "I invited you because the board expected family presence?" There it was, the final piece. Not love, not pride, not longing, expectation. I felt something inside me go very still. For years I had made excuses for him. He was busy. He was stressed. Vanessa influenced him. New York changed people. Success came with pressure. He would come around. He would remember. But sometimes a mother's excuses become a cage she builds around her own pain. And suddenly, I was tired of living inside it. I understand, I said. Ethan blinked, as if he had expected tears, pleading maybe even an apology. But my voice did not break. I hope one day, I continued. You remember who stood beside you before anyone else did. His face shifted. Just slightly. The words reached something. Not enough. But something. Vanessa looked uncomfortable. Lila, don't make this sentimental. I turned toward her. Sentiment is what people call love when they no longer respect it. She went silent. At the far end of the hallway, Tyler Jensen stood frozen near a service door holding a stack of programs. He had heard enough. His young face was pale, and when Ethan noticed him, anger flashed again. Ethan snapped. What are you doing? Tyler swallowed. I was just bringing the updated speaker list, sir. Then bring it somewhere else. Yes, sir. But Tyler's eyes moved to me before he left. Not pity this time. Something more like shame. Not his shame. My son's. Ethan turned back to me. I'll have security arrange a car. A car, I repeated, to take you back. I almost smiled then. Not because anything was funny, but because the night had become so painfully clear. He was standing in a building tied to my husband's sacrifice, inside a company protected by my signature-wearing authority, borrowed from a trust he had never earned, and he was offering to have security remove me. Before I could answer, the ballroom doors opened. Charles Whitmore stepped into the hallway. Behind him stood Daniel Brooks. Neither man looked surprised. Charles's gaze moved from Ethan to me. Is everything all right? Ethan straightened immediately. Yes, I'm handling a family matter. Charles's voice was calm. This ceased being only a family matter when it affected the company. Ethan's face darkened. With all due respect, Charles, you don't get to interfere between me and my mother. Daniel stepped forward. When you attempt to remove the controlling trustee from a company event, interference becomes governance. Vanessa's eyes widened. Ethan froze. The words hung in the hallway like a bell after it has been struck. Controlling trustee. There was no softening that phrase. No hiding it beneath family misunderstanding. No laughing it off as an old woman's drama. Charles looked at me. Mrs. Alexander, would you like to leave? The choice was mine. That alone seemed to unsettle Ethan. I looked toward the ballroom doors where music and applause continued, as if nothing had happened. Then I looked at my son, whose pride had brought us to this narrow hallway under bright hotel lights. I will leave tonight, I said. Not because Ethan asked me to, because I refused to be displayed when convenient and discarded when embarrassing. Ethan's face tightened. But tomorrow, I continued, I will attend the board meeting. Vanessa whispered board meeting. Charles nodded. 9 o'clock. Ethan looked at him sharply. You can't be serious. I am, Charles said. Daniel's voice was quieter but heavier. The documents will be reviewed, conduct will be addressed, and the future of leadership will be discussed. For the first time all evening, Ethan looked afraid. Not sorry, not yet, but afraid. I picked up my purse, smoothed the front of my navy dress, and walked past him. As I reached the elevator, I heard Ethan call after me. Mom? I stopped but did not turn. There was a pause. Long enough for an apology. Long enough for a son to become a son again. But all he said was, don't do this. I closed my eyes. Then I stepped into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I saw Charles and Daniel standing behind him, like Judgment Vanessa pale beside him, and my son, alone in the center of the hallway, surrounded by everything he thought made him powerful. And for the first time in years, I did not rush to save him from the consequences of his own cruelty. I did not sleep much that night. The hotel room Ethan had arranged for me was beautiful, far more beautiful than anything I would have chosen for myself. The bed was wide and soft, the curtains heavy, the bathroom lined with marble. Through the window, New York glittered below me as if the whole city had been dusted with diamonds. But beauty does not comfort a broken heart. I sat in a chair by the window until nearly dawn, still wearing the navy dress Ethan had laughed at. My shoes rested beside me. My feet ached. My back hurt. But those pains were simple. They belonged to the body. The pain in my chest was harder to name. At some point, I took the wrapped compass from my purse. Vanessa must have returned it to Ethan's things during the confusion because Tyler Jensen had quietly brought it to me before I left the gala. He had found me near the elevator and said, almost whispering, "Mrs. Alexander, I think this belongs with you." His eyes were full of apology for something he had not done. I thanked him and held the package all the way to my room. Now I unwrapped it slowly. The silver compass lay in my palm, small and cold. I opened the lid. The needle trembled, searching, then settled north. For when success gets loud, I whispered, reading the card I had written, "Remember where home is." My throat tightened. I had bought it for Ethan. But maybe I was the one who needed direction now. At 8:30 the next morning, Daniel Brooks knocked on my door. He wore the same calm expression he had worn for 30 years, but his eyes softened when he saw me. "You didn't sleep?" he said. "Neither did you." "No." I stepped aside to let him in. He carried a leather briefcase this time, not just a folder. That told me everything. "The board is gathering," he said. I nodded. "Charles asked that we arrive together." I looked toward the bed where the navy dress lay folded neatly. I had changed into a simple gray blouse and black skirt, both old but clean. My pearl earrings were still in place. "Do I need to bring anything?" I asked. Daniel's gaze moved to the compass on the table, then back to me. "Only your resolve." I gave a tired smile. I'm not sure how much I have left. "You have more than you think." We rode the elevator down in silence. In the lobby, people hurried past with coffee cups and rolling suitcases. No one knew that my life had shifted overnight. No one knew that a mother was about to sit across from her son and let truth do what love had failed to do. Outside, a black car waited. Charles was already inside. When I got in, he leaned forward. "Mrs. Alexander, I'm sorry for how last night unfolded." I looked at him. "You didn't cause it." "No," he said, "but perhaps I should have intervened sooner. The board has had concerns about Ethan for months." I turned toward him. "Months?" Charles exchanged a glance with Daniel. "Yes," he said. "His leadership has become increasingly image-driven. Good people have left. Others have been pushed out. Monica Reed has documented troubling patterns." I looked down at my hands. Ethan had not only grown ashamed of me, he had begun treating others the same way. That hurt in a different way. A deeper way. Because a mother can forgive being wounded herself more easily than realizing her child has learned to wound the world. The company headquarters rose from the Manhattan street like a blade of glass. Alexander Global Solutions. The name stretched across the front in silver letters. Yesterday, I had stood beneath that name as a humiliated mother. Today, I entered as the woman whose signature had quietly protected it for years. Security greeted Charles first, then Daniel, then me. "Good morning, Mrs. Alexander," the guard said. There was no laughter in his voice. We rode up to the executive floor. The elevator opened into a quiet reception area with polished floors and framed awards along the walls. I recognized Ethan in several photographs, smiling beside governors, shaking hands with CEOs, cutting ribbons. I wondered how many of those smiles had been real. The boardroom doors were closed. Behind them, I could hear muffled voices. Charles paused before opening them. "Are you ready?" "No." But I nodded. Inside the room was long and bright with a glass wall overlooking the city. Board members sat around a dark table. Monica Reed was there with a stack of reports. Daniel placed his briefcase near the end. Tyler Jensen stood by the screen, pale and nervous, holding a tablet. And Ethan sat at the head of the table. Of course he did. He wore a navy suit, crisp white shirt, and a tie I recognized as one I had sent him years ago for his birthday. He had never told me he wore it. Seeing it there against his throat nearly undid me. Vanessa sat beside him dressed in ivory, her posture stiff and defensive. When Ethan saw me, he stood. For one brief second, I thought he might come toward me. Instead, he said, "I don't understand why this is necessary." Charles closed the door behind us. "Sit down, Ethan." My son's face tightened. "I am sitting at the head of my own boardroom." Charles did not raise his voice. "This is the company boardroom, and today the board will determine whether you remain fit to lead it." The silence that followed was sharp. Ethan slowly sat. I took a chair near Daniel, not at the head, not beside Ethan. I did not need a throne to know what I held. Charles began. "Yesterday evening, during the 20th anniversary gala, multiple members of this board witnessed conduct from the CEO that raised serious concerns regarding judgment professionalism and company culture." Ethan leaned back. "This is absurd. It was a family moment taken out of context." Monica Reed spoke for the first time. "With respect, Ethan, it happened in front of employees, guests, and investors. It was a joke," he said. Monica's eyes did not move. Several employees did not experience it that way. Vanessa cut in. "Employees are sensitive now about everything." Monica turned to her. "Dignity is not sensitivity." I almost looked at her with gratitude, but I kept my eyes on the table. Charles nodded to Daniel. Daniel opened his briefcase and removed several documents. He placed them in front of each board member with practiced precision. "The purpose of this meeting," Daniel said, "is twofold. First, to review governance authority under the Alexander Family Trust. Second, to address documented concerns regarding executive conduct." Ethan laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "So we're really doing this?" "Yes," Daniel said. "We are." He turned on the screen. A legal summary appeared. The Alexander Family Trust controlling beneficiary and trustee Lila Alexander. Executive appointment authority subject to board review and trustee oversight. Ethan stared at the screen. Vanessa's face drained of color. Charles folded his hands. "Ethan, you have served as CEO under board appointment. Your role has never superseded trust authority." "I was never told that," Ethan said. Daniel looked at him. "You were told enough to lead responsibly. You were not told enough to abuse what you did not own." Ethan slammed one hand lightly on the table. "I have grown this company." "Yes," Charles said, "and recently you have endangered it." Monica opened her report. She did not speak cruelly. That almost made it worse. She listed complaints from senior employees who had been mocked for being outdated. She described pressure placed on older staff to retire early. She cited executive spending on luxury branding events while department budgets were cut. She referenced Vanessa's involvement in vendor introductions despite having no formal role. Vanessa stiffened. "I was helping." Monica looked at her. "You were influencing procurement without authorization." Ethan turned on Monica. "You've been collecting this behind my back. I've been doing my job," she said. Tyler stood near the screen, eyes lowered. Charles noticed him. "Tyler, Charles said you submitted a statement regarding last night." Ethan turned sharply. "Tyler." The young man swallowed. "Yes, sir." Read the relevant portion, Charles said. Tyler's hands trembled slightly as he looked at his tablet. At approximately 8:42 p.m., I witnessed Mr. Alexander instruct Mrs. Lila Alexander to leave the event after she had been publicly embarrassed. He stated the invitation had been extended because the board expected family presence. Mrs. Alexander asked if he was asking his mother to leave. He confirmed. Ethan's face darkened. You recorded that? No, Sir Tyler said quietly. I remembered it. The room went silent. Remembered it. Sometimes truth does not need a recording. Sometimes cruelty is clear enough to burn itself into witnesses. Ethan looked at me then. For the first time that morning, really looked. His eyes moved over my gray blouse, my tired face, my hands folded in my lap. Maybe he saw the woman from last night. Maybe he saw the mother from years ago. Maybe he saw for one frightening moment that everyone else in the room was no longer willing to pretend his behavior was acceptable. Mom, he said quieter now. I did not answer. Because this was not the hallway. This was not my kitchen. This was not a place where he could soften me with one wounded word and avoid consequence. Charles leaned forward. Ethan, do you understand who your mother is to this company? Ethan's mouth tightened. He looked at the documents, then at Daniel, then at me. I understand what you're all claiming, he said. Daniel's expression hardened. These are not claims. He slid the original trust certification across the table. Your father signed this 12 days before his final hospitalization. Your mother has honored every provision for 20 years. She allowed you to rise. She allowed you to lead. She allowed you to make mistakes. But she never surrendered authority. Ethan's hand hovered over the document, but did not touch it. Vanessa whispered, Ethan, say something. He looked at her, and for the first time, I saw uncertainty between them. Vanessa had loved the version of my son who appeared untouchable. This room was showing her another version, a smaller one, a frightened one. Charles stood. Effective immediately, this board will consider temporary suspension of Ethan Alexander's executive authority, pending full review. Ethan shot to his feet. You can't suspend me. Charles looked at me. Everyone looked at me. The room seemed to tilt. I had imagined this moment many times over the years and prayed it would never come. I had prayed Ethan would choose humility before humiliation forced it on him. I had prayed love would teach him what power could not. But prayers are not always answered by prevention. Sometimes they are answered by courage. I stood slowly. My son is not my enemy, I said. Ethan's face flickered, but he has forgotten what leadership means. And if this company carries my family's name, then it will not be led by shame, cruelty, or vanity. No one spoke. I turned to Ethan. You laughed at my clothes because you thought they made me small, but those clothes were bought by a woman who survived what you now mock. If you cannot respect that woman, you are not ready to lead the company she helped protect. Ethan's eyes lowered for half a second. Only half. But I saw it. Charles nodded once. The motion will proceed, he said, and as Daniel began reading the formal resolution, I looked out over the city and felt the old world of silence finally begin to end. Daniel's voice filled the boardroom with a calm that made the truth feel even heavier. He did not rush. He did not dramatize. He simply read from the documents as if each sentence had waited 20 years to be spoken aloud. The Alexander Family Trust was established by Robert James Alexander with Lila Marie. Alexander named as controlling trustee and primary beneficiary. The trust holds the controlling interest in Alexander Global Solutions and all predecessor entities. Ethan stared at the papers in front of him. His face had gone pale, but his pride still fought to stay alive. "This is insane," he said. "Dad would never hide something like this from me." Daniel looked at him over the rim of his glasses. "Your father did not hide it to punish you. He structured it to protect you. Protect me from what the room went quiet?" Daniel did not answer. He looked at me, and suddenly I was back in a hospital room 20 years earlier, holding Robert's hand while machines breathed and beeped around us. His skin had been warm but fading. His voice had been weak, but his mind was clear. "Lila," he had whispered, "promise me Ethan won't inherit power before he learns humility." I had cried then. I told him Ethan was a good boy. Robert squeezed my fingers. "He is. But success can starve the soul if no one teaches it gratitude." Now, standing in that boardroom, I felt the full weight of that promise. I looked at Ethan. "Your father loved you," I said. "More than you ever knew." Ethan's eyes flashed with anger. "Don't use Dad to justify this." "I am not using him. I am honoring him." Vanessa leaned forward. "If Lila had this much control, why did she let Ethan work so hard? Why let him believe he was building something?" Charles answered before I could. "Because leadership without entitlement was the intention." Daniel nodded. Robert wanted Ethan to earn his position through performance, not inheritance. Ethan gave a bitter laugh. "So I was being tested my whole life." "No," I said. "You were being given a chance to become the kind of man who could carry what your father left behind." His mouth opened, but no words came. For the first time, I saw confusion beneath the anger. He had spent years believing he was the center of the story. Now he was discovering he had only been one chapter in something older, deeper, and more carefully protected. Daniel slid another document forward. "This is the original capital agreement," he said. Robert and Lila Alexander provided the emergency funding that kept the company alive during its first major crisis. Ethan's eyes moved to me. I could almost hear his thoughts. "Lila, not Dad, alone," me, Daniel continued. "Mrs. Alexander signed off on the second funding round after Robert became ill. She personally authorized the continuation plan that prevented liquidation. I remembered that day. Robert was too weak to leave the house." Daniel sat at our kitchen table with papers spread across the same table Ethan had mocked years later. I signed where Daniel told me to sign my hand, shaking so badly the first signature looked like it belonged to someone else. I had not understood every business term. But I understood Robert's dream, and I understood protecting my son's future. Ethan's voice was quieter now. "You signed company documents?" "Yes," I said, "but you never even talked about business. I talked about what mattered." "You stopped listening before I had the chance to talk about anything else." That struck him. His eyes lowered to the table. Vanessa's face tightened. She looked from Ethan to the board members, calculating, adjusting, searching for a place to stand now that the floor beneath her had shifted. "This doesn't change the fact that Ethan has been the public face of the company," she said. Monica Reed spoke softly but firmly. "No one is denying his contributions. We are questioning his judgment." Vanessa turned on her. "You've clearly been waiting for this." Monica's expression did not change. "I've been waiting for accountability." The word hung in the air. Accountability. It sounded simple, but in that room it felt like a door Ethan had avoided for years. Charles folded his hands on the table. "Ethan, the issue is not merely ownership. It is whether you understand the responsibility attached to leadership." Ethan looked up sharply. "I have led this company through record growth." And through record turnover among senior staff, Monica said. I made hard decisions. You made dismissive ones, she replied. There is a difference. Daniel turned to the final page of the trust summary. Under the terms of the trust, Mrs. Alexander has authority to approve, restrict, or recommend removal of executive leadership when conduct threatens the company's ethical foundation or long-term stability. Ethan pushed back his chair. So that's it, he said. My mother gets to decide whether I keep my job. The way he said my mother cut me. Not with love, with disbelief. As if motherhood made me incapable of judgment. As if the woman who raised him could not possibly understand consequence. I stood slowly. No, Ethan, your actions decide that. He looked at me, breathing hard. You let me walk into this room blind. You walked into this room arrogant, I said. There is a difference. A few board members shifted, but no one interrupted. My voice surprised even me. It was not loud. It did not tremble. It carried the weight of every year I had stayed silent. You laughed at my clothes because you thought they proved I was beneath your world. You let your wife mock my past because you wanted to erase where you came from. You invited me to that gala, not because you wanted your mother beside you, but because the board expected a family image. Ethan's face tightened. I heard you, I said. Every word. Vanessa looked away. I continued. You wanted me quiet, polished, useful, invisible, but you forgot something your father never forgot. I placed my hand on the trust document. Names are not built by people who shine in public. They are built by people who sacrifice in private. For the first time, Ethan looked wounded, truly wounded. But still, pride reached him first. You should have told me, he said. Yes, I replied. Maybe I should have. And maybe you should have treated your mother with respect even when you thought she had nothing to give you. That silenced him. The boardroom seemed to hold its breath. Charles looked at Ethan. The board will now vote on temporary suspension of your executive authority pending review. Vanessa stood. This is outrageous. Charles turned to her. Mrs. Alexander, you are not a board member. Her cheeks flushed bright red. Ethan did not defend her. He was still looking at me. Daniel read the motion. One by one, the board members voted. Yes, yes, yes. Each word landed like a stone dropped into water. When Charles cast the final vote, he turned to me. Mrs. Alexander. I felt every eye in the room settle on my face. This was the moment Ethan feared. Maybe part of me feared it too. Because no mother wants to be the hand that lets consequence fall on her child. But love without truth becomes weakness. And I had mistaken weakness for mercy for too long. I looked at Ethan. I vote yes. His face changed. Not dramatically. Not like in movies. It was smaller than that. His lips parted slightly. His shoulders dropped a fraction. His eyes moved over my face as if he were seeing a stranger where his mother used to be. But I was not a stranger. I was the same woman. He had simply never looked closely enough. Charles nodded. The motion passes. Vanessa whispered Ethan. But Ethan did not move. Daniel closed the folder. Effective immediately, Ethan Alexander is suspended from active CEO authority pending full internal review. Interim operational oversight will transfer to the executive committee under board supervision. The words were formal. The damage was personal. Ethan stood very slowly. Congratulations, Mom. The bitterness in his voice broke my heart, but I did not let it show. This is not revenge, I said. He laughed once, hollow and sharp. What else would you call it? I stepped closer to him. I would call it the first honest thing that has happened between us in years. His eyes flickered. For a second, I thought he might cry. Then Vanessa grabbed her purse and stood beside him. We should go. Ethan remained still. I reached into my bag and pulled out the silver compass, the one he had never opened. I placed it on the table in front of him. I bought this for you before I knew how tonight would end, I said. I thought you might need it someday. He looked down at it. What is it? A reminder, I said. That a man can lose direction long before he loses his title. No one spoke. I turned away before my tears could rise. As Daniel opened the boardroom door for me, I heard Ethan behind me still standing at the head of a table that no longer belonged to him. For the first time in his life, my son looked at me not as an embarrassment, but as someone he had badly underestimated. And the saddest part was I had never wanted to prove him wrong. I had only wanted him to remember how to be right. By noon, the company knew. Not officially at first. Companies rarely bleed truth in clean lines. They leak it through closed doors, lowered voices, unanswered emails, and assistants walking too quickly down hallways. Ethan Alexander had been suspended. That sentence moved through the building like a storm cloud. I did not stay in the boardroom after the vote. Daniel walked with me to a smaller conference room where Charles said I could have privacy. The room overlooked the city, but I did not look out the window. I sat at the table with my hands folded, listening to the distant hum of a company trying to pretend nothing had changed. But everything had. Daniel placed a cup of tea in front of me. You did what needed to be done. I stared at the steam rising from the cup. That does not make it hurt less. No, he said. It doesn't. A few minutes later, Charles came in with Monica Reed. Monica carried a folder against her chest, but her expression was softer than it had been in the boardroom. Mrs. Alexander, she said, I wanted to say I'm sorry for what happened last night. I looked up. You have nothing to apologize for. Maybe not personally, she said. But I've watched the culture here change. I documented it. I raised concerns. Still, I know many employees felt invisible for too long. Invisible. That word followed me. I know something about that, I said. Monica's eyes filled with understanding. Charles sat across from me. We need to discuss next steps. The investors will require reassurance. Staff will need a statement. Ethan's suspension will be framed as temporary pending internal review. Will he be allowed back? I asked. Charles did not answer quickly. That depends on Ethan. I nodded. That was the answer I had expected and feared. Because part of me still wanted someone to say, no, Lila, it's finished. You never have to be hurt by him again. But motherhood does not end when a child becomes cruel. It only becomes more complicated. Across the building, Ethan was in his office. I knew because Tyler quietly told Daniel that Ethan had gone there after the meeting, Vanessa following him like a shadow. I imagined him standing behind his massive desk, looking out at the skyline, furious that the world had not bent to him. I imagined Vanessa pacing. I did not have to imagine for long. The door to the conference room opened without a knock. Vanessa entered first. Her face was pale with anger. Ethan stood behind her, silent, his suit jacket unbuttoned, his tie loosened. He looked less like a CEO now, and more like a man who had been forced to step out of a costume before he was ready. Charles stood. This is a private meeting. Vanessa ignored him and looked directly at me. How could you do this to your own son? Her voice shook, but not with grief. With outrage. I did not rise. Vanessa, this is not the time. No, this is exactly the time. She pointed toward the hallway. People are whispering. Investors are calling. Ethan's reputation is being destroyed. I looked at Ethan. He said nothing, so I turned back to her. His reputation was not destroyed by accountability. It was damaged by behavior. Vanessa laughed bitterly. You sound very noble now that you have power. Daniel's voice sharpened. Mrs. Alexander has had power for years. She simply chose restraint. Vanessa turned on him. And you helped her humiliate him. No, Daniel said. I helped protect the company from further harm. Ethan finally spoke. Enough, Vanessa. His voice was low. She turned to him shocked. Enough, Ethan, they just took your company. He looked at me then, and the bitterness returned. My company, he repeated quietly. I stood at last. That is the problem, Ethan. You still think ownership is the only thing that makes something yours. His eyes hardened. Don't lecture me. I am not lecturing you. I am telling you the truth you have avoided. Vanessa crossed her arms. The truth is, you waited until the worst possible moment to reveal this. You could have spoken privately. You could have warned him. But you chose a boardroom. I felt that accusation land. Because part of it was not entirely false. I had waited too long. But I had not chosen the cruelty that forced the truth into daylight. I did not choose last night, I said. Ethan did. Ethan looked away. Vanessa's voice rose. He made a joke. Monica, who had been quiet until then, stepped forward. Mrs. Alexander, I reviewed 3 employee complaints this morning from people who witnessed that joke. One of them wrote that if the CEO could humiliate his own mother publicly, no employee was safe from his contempt. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Charles added, 2 investors have already asked whether leadership instability reflects deeper governance issues. This is not personal drama anymore. Ethan's face tightened. So, what happens now? Charles looked at him. You are suspended from active executive authority. You will retain access to counsel and may respond to the internal review. You will not issue company directives, contact department heads regarding business decisions, or speak to press on behalf of the company. Ethan laughed under his breath. So I'm being treated like a criminal. No, I said. You are being treated like a man who must answer for what he has done. His eyes flashed toward me. And what exactly do you want from me? Mom begging tears. A public apology. The room went still. I looked at him for a long moment. What did I want? I wanted the impossible. I wanted my little boy back. I wanted him at 12 years old sitting at our kitchen table asking if I had eaten. I wanted him before money taught him to measure people. Before Vanessa's polished world made him ashamed of chipped plates and old coats. Before success became louder than love. But none of that could be demanded in a conference room. So I told him the only thing that could still matter. I want you to learn respect before there is nothing left in you worth respecting. His face changed. Pain crossed it quick and sharp. Then pride buried it again. Vanessa stepped closer to him. We're leaving. Ethan did not move. I continued softer now. I am not asking the board to destroy you. I refuse that. His eyes lifted. Yes, Charles said. Permanent removal was discussed. Mrs. Alexander opposed immediate termination. Vanessa looked startled. Ethan stared at me. Why? The question came out smaller than he intended. Because you are still my son? I said. And because consequences should leave room for redemption when redemption is still possible. For the first time, he had no quick answer. Daniel placed a document on the table. The board is offering a corrective path. It includes leadership coaching, formal apology to staff, review of executive spending ethics training, and a probationary operational role under supervision if reinstatement is considered. Vanessa scoffed. You want him to be humiliated. No, Monica said. We want him to understand the people he humiliated. Ethan looked at the document, but did not pick it up. Outside the conference room, voices rose briefly, then faded. Somewhere in the building, employees were still working, answering calls, sending reports, protecting the company, while its leader stood in a room arguing over pride. I thought of the older employees Monica had mentioned. People pressured to leave before retirement benefits matured. People who had given years of their lives and were treated like outdated furniture. That was when my grief sharpened into something clearer. This was not only about me. It had never been only about me. Ethan, I said your father built this company to provide dignity, not just profit. Dignity. If you cannot offer that to the people who work here, you cannot lead them. He swallowed. Vanessa grabbed his arm. Don't listen to this. They're trying to break you. I looked at her hand on his sleeve. No, I said. We are trying to stop him from breaking everyone else. Ethan gently pulled his arm away from Vanessa. It was a small movement, but everyone noticed. Vanessa noticed most of all. Her eyes narrowed. Ethan. He looked exhausted. I need air. Then he walked out. Vanessa hesitated, furious and uncertain, before following him. The door closed. For a long moment, none of us spoke. Charles exhaled slowly. That went better than I expected. I almost laughed, but my throat ached too much. Monica gathered her folder. I'll prepare the internal statement. Daniel looked at me. And you? I walked to the window then. Far below, people moved through Manhattan like tiny pieces of a machine that never stopped. The city did not care that my son had fallen. The world rarely pauses for private heartbreak. I'm going home tomorrow, I said. Daniel nodded. Ohio. Yes. Charles looked surprised. Mrs. Alexander, the company may need you here. The company has a board, I said, and lawyers, and people who know how to manage crisis. I turned from the window. But Ethan needs to decide what kind of man he wants to be when no one is applauding him. Daniel studied me, and if he chooses anger, I picked up my purse. Then he will learn that anger cannot give back what arrogance takes away. As I left the room, I passed Ethan's office. The door was partly open. Inside, I saw the silver compass sitting on his desk, still unopened, but no longer discarded. That was not forgiveness. It was not change. Not yet. But it was the first sign that something had landed. And sometimes before a heart can break open, it must first lose the illusion that it is untouchable. I returned to Ohio the next morning. Daniel offered to stay in New York with me. Charles suggested I remain close in case the board needed immediate decisions. Monica even arranged a quiet office where I could work privately if I wanted to avoid the press. But I had no desire to sit inside that glass tower and watch my son's pride collapse floor by floor. So I went home. The flight back felt longer than the flight there. I sat by the window, looking down at clouds that seemed peaceful from above, though I knew storms could be hiding beneath them. My hands rested in my lap. The pearl earrings were still in my ears, but I had taken off the navy dress and folded it carefully into my suitcase. It had survived the night. So had I. When the taxi pulled into my driveway, the little white house looked exactly as I had left it. The porch railing still needed paint. The maple tree still dropped yellow leaves across the walkway. The mailbox leaned slightly to one side. Nothing had changed. And yet, I felt like I had returned from a war no one on my street knew had happened. Inside the house smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old wood. I set my suitcase by the door, took off my shoes, and stood in the silence. Then I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the kind of crying that comes when a woman has been strong too long and finally reaches a room where no one is watching. I cried for the boy Ethan had been. I cried for the man he had become. I cried for Robert, who had seen danger and success long before I did. After a while, I wiped my face, made tea, and went to my bedroom. The metal box was still in the closet beneath the quilt. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. For years, that box had felt like a responsibility. That day, it felt like a witness. The key was in the top drawer of my nightstand, tucked inside an old envelope. My hands trembled as I unlocked it. Inside were the documents Daniel had copied, but also things no boardroom had seen. Robert's letters, his final notes, photographs from the early years. A napkin from the diner where I used to work with Ethan's childish handwriting on the back. Mom is the best cook even when she burns toast. I laughed through fresh tears. Then I found the letter Robert had written to Ethan, but asked me not to give him until the right time. The envelope was yellowed now. Ethan's name was written across the front in Robert's hand. Ethan. Just that. I touched the letters. Robert had written it 12 days before his final hospitalization, the same week he signed the trust papers. He had known more than he admitted. Men like Robert often try to protect the people they love from fear, even while fear is sitting beside them. I did not open the letter. Not yet. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed and let memory take me where it wanted. Ethan was 8 the first time he realized we had less than other families. It was December, bitterly cold, and he wanted a red winter coat from the department store window. It had silver snaps and a hood lined with fake fur. He stood outside the glass, staring at it like it was treasure. Maybe next week, I told him. He nodded, but his little face fell. Next week never came. I found a used brown coat at a church sale and sewed a patch over the torn pocket. When I gave it to him, he tried to smile. "It's warm," he said. That night, I heard him crying quietly in his room. The next morning, I walked 2 miles through snow to pick up an extra cleaning shift. By Christmas Eve, I had enough money to buy the red coat. Not knew the store had marked it down after a button went missing, but I bought it anyway and sewed on a matching button from my sewing tin. When Ethan opened it, he threw his arms around my neck. "I'll buy you the nicest coat in the world someday, Mom," he whispered. I held him so tightly. "You don't have to buy me anything," I said. "Just grow up kind." That was all I had ever truly wanted. Not wealth, not status, kindness. Another memory came. Ethan, at 16, angry because I would not let him quit his summer job at the grocery store. He said stocking shelves was embarrassing. He said rich kids did not have to do that. I told him work is never embarrassing. Looking down on work is. He did not speak to me for 2 days. On the 3rd night, he came into the kitchen while I was washing dishes and said, "I'm sorry, Mom." I had kissed his forehead. Back then, apologies came easier to him. Back then, pride had not yet learned to wear a suit. In New York, Ethan spent that same afternoon inside his penthouse, though I did not know the details until later. Tyler told me months afterward when healing had made certain truths easier to hear. After leaving the company, Ethan had gone home furious. Vanessa followed him from room to room, talking quickly. "You need a lawyer," she said. "A crisis team. A statement. We can frame this as elder manipulation or board politics." Ethan stood by the window, looking out over Manhattan. "She's my mother," he said. Vanessa scoffed. "She humiliated you." He turned then. "No, I humiliated her." It was the first honest sentence he had spoken in days. Vanessa did not like it. She had built her life around Ethan's certainty. His money, his title, his confidence, his ability to enter rooms and be obeyed. A humbled Ethan frightened her more than an angry one. So she changed tactics. "She lied to you," Vanessa said. "All these years." She sat in that little house pretending to be some simple old woman while holding power over your head. Ethan looked at the coffee table. The silver compass sat there, still unopened. He picked it up. For when success gets loud, remember where home is. He read the card once. Then again. Something in him must have shifted because he did not throw it away. He opened the compass and watched the needle settle. North. Always north. That evening, Tyler Jensen came by Ethan's penthouse with documents he needed to sign, acknowledging temporary suspension protocols. Ethan almost refused to see him, but finally let him in. Tyler was young, but not foolish. He had worked closely enough with Ethan to admire him once, fear him later, and pity him now. "Leave them on the table," Ethan said. Tyler did. Then perhaps because he was young enough to still believe truth should be spoken, he said, "Sir, may I say something?" Ethan looked at him coldly. "Probably not." Tyler swallowed. "Your mother loved you more than anyone in that room did." Ethan's face hardened. "You don't know anything about my mother." "No," Tyler said. "But I know what I saw. She looked at you like you were breaking her heart, and she still tried to protect you." Ethan said nothing. Tyler continued quieter now. "People here didn't turn against you because you're rich. They turned away because you made them feel small." That sentence stayed with Ethan. I know because later he told me it followed him from room to room that night. Back in Ohio, I opened a photo album and found a picture from Ethan's college graduation. I was standing beside him in the same faded coat he would one day mock. My smile was wide. His arm was around my shoulders. He looked proud to have me there. What happens to people I used to think success changed them? Now I believe success only reveals what they have stopped guarding. Pride had entered my son slowly, through praise, through wealth, through rooms where people laughed at his jokes because they wanted something, through a wife who polished his image but never challenged his soul, through a world that told him humble beginnings were something to overcome instead of honor. But I had made mistakes too. I had stayed silent too long. I had confused patience with wisdom. I had let him drift because I feared losing him if I pulled too hard. That evening, as the sun lowered behind my little house, my phone rang. Ethan. My heart stopped. I let it ring twice, 3 times. Then I answered. For a moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear his breathing. "Mom," he said at last. One word, not polished, not angry, just small. "Yes, Ethan." Another silence. I waited. I wanted an apology. I wanted remorse. I wanted my son to say everything he should have said in that hallway. But all he whispered was, "Did Dad really write me a letter?" I closed my eyes. So Daniel had told him. "Yes," I said. "Do you still have it?" I looked at the yellowed envelope on my bed. "Yes." His breath shook. "What does it say?" I picked up the envelope and held it against my chest. "I don't know," I said. "I never opened it." The silence changed then. It became heavier. More human. Finally, Ethan said, "I don't know who I am right now." Tears filled my eyes. For the first time in years, my son was not performing. He was lost. And as painful as that was, lost was better than cruel. Because lost people can still find their way home. Ethan did not come home that night. After he asked about Robert's letter, the silence between us stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Then he said, "I need time," and hung up before I could answer. I sat on the edge of my bed with the yellowed envelope in my lap. For years, I had imagined handing that letter to Ethan with pride. Maybe on his wedding day. Maybe when he became a father. Maybe when he finally slowed down long enough to ask about Robert not as a symbol, but as a man. I had never imagined giving it to him after he lost his title. But life rarely waits for the perfect moment to tell the truth. In New York, Ethan's perfect life began to empty around him. The first people to disappear were the loudest ones. The men who had clapped him on the back at restaurants stopped answering his calls. The investors who once laughed too hard at his jokes suddenly had assistants respond for them. The social friends Vanessa entertained in their penthouse sent short messages full of careful distance. Thinking of you. Hope things settle soon. Let us know when everything is resolved. Resolved. As if my son had become a business inconvenience. Vanessa noticed before Ethan did. She always had a sharp eye for status. She could feel a room cooling before anyone else admitted the temperature had changed. By the second evening after the board meeting, she was pacing their penthouse in silk lounge clothes, phone in hand, anger flashing across her face. Madison canceled dinner, she said. Ethan sat on the sofa, still wearing the same shirt from that morning, staring at the unopened reports on the coffee table. He did not answer. And the Hendersons suddenly have a conflict next weekend. Of course they do. Vanessa laughed bitterly. People are treating us like we're contagious. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Maybe they're treating me like I earned it? She stopped pacing. What did you just say? He looked up. Nothing. No, say it again. Her voice sharpened. Because if you're starting to believe their version of this, then we have a bigger problem. Their version, Ethan asked. Yes. Your mother's version. The board's version. Monica's little victim parade. He stared at her. For the first time, her words sounded ugly to him. Maybe they had always been ugly. Maybe he had simply been standing too close to pride to hear it. Those people worked for me, he said. They worked under you, Vanessa corrected. There's a difference. Ethan's eyes narrowed. That's exactly the problem. Vanessa threw up her hands. Oh, wonderful. Now you're becoming philosophical because Lila made you feel guilty. At the mention of my name, Ethan looked toward the coffee table. The silver compass sat there open. The needle pointed north. Vanessa followed his gaze and scoffed. That thing again, Ethan picked it up carefully. She bought it before everything happened, he said. She bought it to manipulate you. No, he said quietly. She bought it because she still thought I was worth guiding. Vanessa stared at him as if he had betrayed her. You are not seriously defending her. I'm trying to understand her. Understand her? Vanessa's voice rose. Ethan, she took your company. He looked at her, then tired and hollow. Maybe it was never mine the way I thought. That sentence changed the room. Vanessa's face hardened, not with fear this time, but calculation. If you give in, she said slowly, you'll never get back what you lost. Ethan closed the compass. Maybe I need to figure out what I lost before the company. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I didn't marry a man who apologizes his way into weakness. He looked at her for a long time. No, he said. You married a title. The slap came fast. Not hard enough to injure him, but sharp enough to silence the room. Vanessa's hand flew to her own mouth afterward, shocked by herself. Ethan touched his cheek, more stunned than angry. For a moment, they only stared at each other. Then Vanessa turned away. I'm going to Los Angeles, she said. I need space from this disaster. He did not stop her. That seemed to wound her pride more than any argument could have. She packed 2 suitcases that night. Jewelry, shoes, designer clothes, the things she considered essential. She did not take the framed photo from their wedding. She did not take the small bowl I had given them as a housewarming gift, handmade by a woman from my church. By midnight, she was gone. And Ethan was alone in a penthouse that suddenly felt less like success and more like a showroom after closing. He told me later that silence was the first thing that frightened him. Not the board, not the suspension, not even Vanessa leaving. Silence. Because in silence, There was no applause to hide behind. He walked from room to room, turning on lights he did not need. The kitchen counters shone. The city glittered beyond the windows. Everything was expensive. Everything was spotless. Nothing felt warm. On a shelf near the hallway, he found an old photo album I had mailed years earlier. I had sent it after Vanessa complained that they had too many random family things arriving at the penthouse. Ethan had never mentioned receiving it. Now he pulled it down. The first photo was his kindergarten graduation. He wore a paper crown and held a certificate upside down. I stood beside him in a faded blue blouse, smiling like he had won the Nobel Prize. The next was his 10th birthday. I had baked a lopsided chocolate cake because I could not afford a store-bought one. Ethan's face was bright with joy. Then his high school graduation, then college, then his first office job. In almost every picture I was wearing the same coat, the coat he had mocked. Not because I loved that coat, because every time I had money for something new, Ethan needed something more. Books, shoes, application fees, gas, rent, a suit for interviews. Ethan sat on the floor with the album open across his knees. And finally, alone where no one could see him, my son began to cry. Not a few controlled tears. Not the dignified sadness of a man preserving his pride. He broke, the kind of breaking that bends the body forward and steals the breath. The kind that comes when memory stops protecting you from yourself. He cried for the mother he had laughed at. He cried for the father whose warning he had become. He cried because the life he had built looked suddenly tall and empty. At 1:17 in the morning, my phone rang. I was awake. Mothers often are when their children are lost, even if those children are grown men in distant cities. I answered on the first ring. Ethan. For several seconds, I heard only his breathing. Then he said, "Mom, did you really walk 2 miles in the snow for that red coat?" My eyes filled immediately. Daniel must have told him some things. Or maybe he had remembered. "Yes," I whispered. "I forgot." His voice cracked on the second word. I closed my eyes. "I know." "No," he said. "I didn't just forget. I erased it. I made myself into someone who could look at you and not see any of it." I pressed my hand to my chest. Across all those miles, I could feel my son standing at the edge of something painful and necessary. "Ethan," I said softly, remembering hurts. "I deserve it. That is not the point." "What is the point?" I looked toward Robert's letter on the table. "The point is what you do after it hurts." He was quiet. Then he whispered Vanessa left. I was not surprised, but I was still sad for him. "I'm sorry. She said I was becoming weak, and do you believe her?" Another long silence. "No," he said. "I think I've been weak for a long time. I just called it power." Tears slipped down my face. That was the first moment I heard real change in him. Not complete, not healed, but real. "Mom," he said, "can I come home?" My heart broke open. Not because everything was fixed, because it wasn't. An apology had not yet been spoken. Trust had not yet been rebuilt. The wounds were still fresh, and love alone could not erase them. But my son was asking for home. Not the company, not the title. Home. I looked around my little bedroom at the old curtains, the creaking floor, the metal box, the letter waiting under lamplight. "Yes," I said. His breath shook. "But Ethan." "Yes, you cannot come home to hide from consequences." "I know. You cannot come home expecting me to pretend nothing happened." "I know. And you cannot come home as the man who laughed at me in that ballroom." This time, his silence was not defensive. It was humble. I don't want to be that man anymore, he said. I held the phone tighter. Then drive carefully, I whispered. I'll leave the porch light on. After we hung up, I walked to the front door and turned on the light. Outside, the night was cold and still. The porch railing still needed paint. Leaves scattered across the steps. My house was small, old, and unimpressive by the standards Ethan had worshipped, but it had one thing his penthouse did not. It knew how to welcome a broken heart without asking what it was worth. Ethan arrived just before sunrise. I heard the car before I saw it, tires crunching slowly over the gravel driveway. I had been sitting in the kitchen for hours, pretending to drink tea that had gone cold long before midnight. The porch light was still on, casting a soft yellow circle over the front steps. For a moment, I could not move. Then I stood, walked to the window, and saw my son sitting behind the wheel of a black rental car, both hands gripping it like he had driven through more than miles to get here. He did not get out right away. He just sat there. I understood. Sometimes coming home is harder than leaving. Finally, the driver's door opened. Ethan stepped out wearing yesterday's clothes. His coat unbuttoned, his hair messy, his face pale with exhaustion. He looked older than he had 3 days ago. Not in years, but in truth. He looked toward the house. Toward me. I opened the door before he knocked. Neither of us spoke. The cold morning air slipped between us. Behind him, the sky was beginning to turn gray-blue. A few dry leaves scraped across the porch. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice broke on the second word. I held the door open. "Come in. It's cold." He stepped inside slowly, as if afraid the floor might reject him. His eyes moved around the living room, the old sofa, the framed graduation photo, Robert's picture on the mantel, the quilt folded over the chair. All the things he had once dismissed as small. Now he looked at them like evidence. I closed the door. "Do you want coffee?" I asked. He gave a weak laugh, almost a sob. "You're offering me coffee? You drove all night." His face crumpled for half a second, but he fought it back. "I don't deserve coffee." "No," I said gently. "You don't deserve cruelty either. Sit down." He sat at the kitchen table, the same table that had raised him. For a while, I moved around the kitchen because it gave my hands something to do. I poured coffee into his old blue mug, the one with a chipped handle. I set toast on a plate. I placed both in front of him. He stared at the mug. "You kept this. You made it in summer camp when you were 9. It's ugly." "It is?" I said. A small, broken smile touched his mouth. Then it vanished. "Mom," he whispered. "I am so sorry." I sat across from him. This was the moment I had wanted, and still it hurt. "I'm sorry for laughing at you," he said. "For the dress, the coat, the shoes. For letting Vanessa talk to you like you were beneath us. For inviting you because the board expected it instead of because I wanted my mother there." His hands shook around the mug. "I'm sorry for making you feel small in a room that should have honored you." I looked down at the table. The apology was real. But real apologies do not erase real wounds. "Ethan, I said an apology is a door. It is not the whole house." He nodded slowly. "I know. I'm trying to." I studied his face. He looked like a boy again, but not innocent. More like someone standing among the ruins of himself, unsure which pieces were worth saving. "I need to ask you something," I said. "Anything. When you looked at me in that ballroom, what did you see?" He closed his eyes. Shame moved across his face. I saw everything I was afraid people would know about me. I did not speak. He forced himself to continue. "I saw Ohio. I saw the diner. I saw the old house. I saw the years when we didn't have enough. And instead of feeling grateful, I felt exposed. His voice cracked. I hated that in myself, so I turned it on you. The truth was ugly, but it was truth. And truth, even ugly truth, can become a beginning. I stood and walked to the mantel. Robert's photograph watched over the room, steady and quiet. Beside it lay the yellowed envelope. I picked it up. Ethan saw it and went still. Is that Dad's letter? Yes. I carried it to the table and placed it between us. His hand reached toward it, then stopped. Did he know I would become like this? No, I said. He feared success might test you. That is different. Ethan swallowed. Did I fail? I looked at him with all the love and pain a mother can hold. Yes, I said. But failure is not the end unless you protect it with pride. He bowed his head. For a long moment, he did not touch the letter. Then he picked it up carefully and opened it. I watched his eyes move over Robert's handwriting. At first, his face stayed still. Then his mouth trembled. He read silently, but I knew where the words must have found him. Robert would have written about humility, about work, about the danger of becoming impressed with your own reflection, about me, perhaps, about the woman who had carried more than Ethan ever saw. When he finished, Ethan pressed the letter to his mouth and broke down. Not like the night before. This was quieter, deeper. Dad said, he whispered, that if I ever became ashamed of you, I should know I had become poor in the only way that matters. Tears filled my eyes. Robert, even gone, he still knew how to reach the places I could not. Ethan looked at me. I became poor, Mom. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. You became lost. He gripped my fingers like he used to as a child. I don't know how to fix it. One honest step at a time. He nodded, wiping his face. Tell me what to do. No, I said. He looked up, startled. I will not hand you a script for redemption. That would only make this another performance. His shoulders sank. You need to decide what kind of man you want to be when no one is clapping. Then you need to live that way long enough for people to believe it. He looked around the kitchen again. I want to start here, he said. Here, he nodded toward the window. The porch railing. It needs paint. The gutter is loose. The back step is cracked. Despite everything, I almost smiled. You noticed? I noticed a lot on the way in. That house has needed fixing for years. So have I. The words settled between us. After breakfast, Ethan changed into an old sweatshirt he found in the hall closet, one from his college days. It barely fit him now. We went outside together into the cold morning. The porch railing was worse than I liked to admit. Paint flaked beneath his fingers. One section wobbled when he touched it. You should have called someone, he said. I know how to tighten screws. Mom. I looked at him. He caught himself. Not commanding, not judging, just concern. I mean, you shouldn't have had to do it alone. That was better. We spent the morning scraping paint. At first the silence was awkward, then it became workable. Ethan held the ladder while I cleaned the gutter. I handed him tools. He asked questions instead of pretending he knew everything. Once, he looked at my hands. I used to think your hands looked old, he said. I paused. He swallowed. Now, I think they look like proof. I looked away before he could see my tears. By noon, we were both tired and covered in dust. I made grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, the same lunch I used to make when money was tight. Ethan took one bite and closed his eyes. I missed this, he said. You used to complain we ate it too much. I was stupid. You were young. I stayed stupid too long. I did not argue. That evening, Daniel called to update me. Ethan was in the living room reading Robert's letter again. The board expects his response within the week, Daniel said. He knows. Is he sincere? I looked at my son through the doorway. He was sitting beneath his graduation photo, shoulders bent, holding his father's words like they were fragile. I think he is beginning to be. After I hung up, Ethan came into the kitchen. I need to go back, he said. I nodded. Yes, I need to apologize. Not just to you, to Monica, Tyler, the staff, the people I pushed out. Yes, and I need to accept whatever the board decides. That would be a start. He looked at me, fear and determination fighting in his eyes. Will you ever forgive me? The question hurt because I did not have a simple answer. I love you, I said. That has never stopped. His eyes filled. But forgiveness, I continued, will have to grow where trust was broken, and trust grows slowly. He nodded. I'll wait, he whispered. No, I said. Don't wait. Work. For the first time, his smile was small but real. Yes, Mom. That night, before he slept in his old room, Ethan stood in the doorway and looked back at me. I came here thinking I lost my company, he said. But I think I almost lost my soul. I looked at him, my heart aching with hope I was afraid to trust. Then be grateful you noticed before it was gone. He nodded, and for the first time in many years, my son went to sleep under my roof, not as a powerful man hiding from shame, but as a broken man willing to begin again. Ethan returned to New York 2 days later. This time, he did not leave in a private car arranged by someone else. He rented a plain sedan, packed one small bag, and placed Robert's letter and the silver compass on the passenger seat beside him. Before he pulled out of my driveway, he rolled down the window. I'm scared, he admitted. I stood on the porch in my old cardigan. Good. He blinked. Fear can make a man careful, I said. Pride only makes him loud. He nodded slowly, then looked at the house one more time. I'll call you when I get there. Drive safely. I will. He hesitated. Mom, yes, I know saying sorry once isn't enough. No, I said gently. It isn't. I'll prove it. I looked at my son, really looked at him. His face still carried exhaustion, but there was something different in his eyes now. Not confidence, not yet. Something quieter. Responsibility. Don't prove it with words, I told him. Prove it with choices. He swallowed. I will. Then he drove away. I watched until the car disappeared beyond the bend in the road. Only then did I let myself breathe. The house felt larger after he left. Not empty, exactly, but waiting. As if even the walls knew this was not the end of the story, only the hardest turn in it. That afternoon, Daniel called. Ethan contacted the board, he said. He requested permission to address the staff. My hand tightened around the phone. Already? Yes. He also asked Monica Reed for a private meeting. How did she respond? She agreed, but she made it clear it would be professional, not personal. Good, I said. Daniel paused. Leela, are you prepared for the possibility that he may fail? I looked out the kitchen window at the porch railing Ethan had helped scrape. Half repaired? Half raw. Yes, I said, but I'm also prepared to let him try. The next morning, Ethan stood in the same company lobby where he had humiliated me. Only now there were no chandeliers, no champagne, no polished gala crowd to impress. Just employees arriving with coffee cups, laptop bags, tired eyes, and cautious curiosity. Monica had arranged the meeting in the main auditorium, not the executive boardroom. That mattered. If Ethan wanted to apologize to the people he had made feel small, he would not do it from a throne. He stood at the front of the room without a podium. Charles sat in the first row. Daniel stood near the side wall. Monica sat with her folder closed on her lap. Tyler Jensen stood near the back, arms folded, uncertain. Employees filled the seats slowly. Some looked angry. Some looked curious. Some looked like they had already decided nothing he said would matter. Ethan told me later that facing them was harder than facing the board. Because the board could take his title. Those people could refuse to give him back their respect. When the room settled, Ethan looked down at the compass in his hand. Then he placed it on a small table beside him. "I asked to speak today," he began, "because I owe many of you an apology." No one moved. He took a breath. "Last week at the anniversary gala, I publicly humiliated my mother. Some of you saw it. Some of you heard about it. There is no excuse for what I said or how I behaved." A few employees exchanged glances. Ethan continued, his voice unsteady but clear. "I called it a joke because I was too cowardly to call it cruelty." Monica's eyes lifted. Tyler looked down. "My mother, Leela Alexander, sacrificed more for my life than I ever deserved. I mocked the very signs of those sacrifices because I had become ashamed of where I came from." The room was silent now, not forgiving, listening. "That shame did not begin or end with her," Ethan said. "I carried it into this company. I dismissed older employees as outdated. I valued appearance over wisdom. I confused fear with respect. I rewarded people who flattered me and ignored people who challenged me." His voice broke slightly. "I hurt people here." A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. An older man near the aisle stared at the floor. Ethan looked toward Monica. "Ms. Reed, you raised concerns I should have listened to. Instead, I treated accountability like betrayal. I apologize." Monica nodded once, not warmly, but with dignity. Then Ethan looked toward the back. "Tyler, I put you in positions where loyalty meant silence." "That was wrong." Tyler's jaw tightened, but he nodded too. Ethan placed both hands in front of him. "I am suspended from executive authority. I accept that. I will cooperate fully with the board's review. I will not ask any of you to defend me, excuse me, or trust me before I earn it." That sentence seemed to shift something. Not everything, but something. Then he said the words that mattered most. "If I return to leadership someday, it will not be because my last name is on the building. It will be because I have learned how to honor the people inside it." When he finished, no one applauded. And that was right. Some apologies should not be rewarded like performances. People simply sat with it. Then Charles stood. "This company will begin an internal culture review immediately," he said. "Employees may speak without fear of retaliation. The board will listen." That received something better than applause. Relief. Over the next week, Ethan did what I had told him to do. He worked. Not as CEO. Not as a man giving orders. As a man learning what his orders had done. He met with employees who had filed complaints. Some refused to meet him, and he accepted that. Some spoke with him and did not soften their words. One older project manager named Harold Pierce told him, "You made me feel like 32 years of loyalty had an expiration date." Ethan did not defend himself. He wrote it down. A woman from finance told him she had stopped speaking in meetings because he once laughed when she questioned a luxury branding expense. He apologized. She said, "I don't need your apology. I need you to never do that to another woman in this company." He wrote that down too. Monica required him to review exit interviews from employees who had left under pressure. He read every one. By the third file, he had to leave the room. By the fifth, he came back. That mattered. Vanessa returned from Los Angeles after 4 days. She expected Ethan to be desperate. He was not. She entered the penthouse wearing sunglasses and carrying shopping bags ready to reclaim the life she understood. But she found Ethan at the dining table surrounded by employee reports, Robert's letter beside him, the compass open near his hand. "You're still doing this?" she asked. He looked up. "Yes." "This guilt performance." "It isn't a performance." She laughed. "Everything is a performance, Ethan. You just forgot how to control the audience." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he said, "That's how you see people?" Vanessa rolled her eyes. "That's how the world works." "No," he said quietly. "That's how we became empty." Her face hardened. Yes," he said. "We." The argument lasted less than 20 minutes, but it ended a marriage that had been cracking long before either of them admitted it. Vanessa told him he was choosing humiliation over power. Ethan told her he was choosing truth over pretending. She left again that night. This time he did not watch from the window. He sat back down and kept reading. Meanwhile, I stayed in Ohio and waited. Waiting is one of motherhood's oldest disciplines. We wait for first steps, late-night calls, test results, apologies, healing. We wait through anger, through silence, through hope that scares us because we know hope can hurt. Ethan called every evening. Not long calls, honest ones. He told me about Harold Pierce, about the finance director, about Tyler, about Monica's review, about Vanessa leaving. One night, he said, "I think I loved how she made me look more than I loved who we were together." I closed my eyes. That is a painful thing to realize. Yes, but necessary. Yes. Another night he asked, "Do you think Dad would hate me?" "No," I said immediately. "Your father would be disappointed, angry maybe, but hate was never in him. I'm disappointed in me. Then let that disappointment teach you." By the end of the month, the board reached its decision. Ethan would not return as CEO, not yet. Instead, Charles would serve as interim executive chair, Monica would lead a culture restoration committee, and Ethan would enter a supervised advisory role with no direct authority over personnel or spending for 1 year. A year. When Daniel told me, I waited for the old mother in me to ache. She did, but the wiser part of me knew it was fair. Ethan called that evening. "I accepted," he said. "Are you angry?" "Yes," he admitted. "A little." I smiled sadly. "That's honest. But I know it's right." That was better. Much better. "And Mom?" "Yes." I asked them to remove my portrait from the lobby. I was surprised. Why? Because I don't want people walking in and seeing one man's face like he built everything alone. My throat tightened. What will go there instead? He paused. Photos of the first office, the early employees. Dad. And if you allow it, you. I looked toward Robert's photograph on my mantle. For years I had hidden from that company because I thought silence protected my son. Now my son was asking to make the truth visible. "I'll think about it," I said. He laughed softly. "That means no for now." "It means I'll think about it." "Yes, Mom." His voice held something I had not heard in years. Respect, not fear, not need. Respect. And as I hung up the phone, I looked at the half-painted porch railing outside my window. It was still unfinished, but the first coat had dried clean. Sometimes repair looks ugly before it looks beautiful. Sometimes a family has to strip away old paint, expose the damaged sand down the rough places, and begin again with patient hands. Ethan was not healed. Neither was I. But for the first time in a long time, we were no longer pretending the damage was not there. And that made healing possible. 1 year later, I stood in the lobby of Alexander Global Solutions again. This time, no one laughed. The glass doors opened with a soft whisper, and for a moment, I simply stood there, letting the memory of that terrible night pass through me without taking hold. The lobby was the same in many ways: polished floors, high ceilings, sunlight pouring through the windows, but something important had changed. The wall behind the reception desk no longer held Ethan's portrait. Instead, there was a long display of photographs. The first small office. Robert standing beside a rented desk. Early employees in rolled-up sleeves. A younger version of me sitting at a kitchen table with papers spread before me, one hand holding a pen, the other resting near a cup of coffee. I had forgotten Daniel took that picture. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "Legacy is built by those who sacrifice when no one is watching." I touched the words with trembling fingers. Ethan stood beside me quiet. He looked different now, still handsome, still well-dressed, but softer around the eyes. The sharpness that once made him seem powerful had been replaced by something steadier. Humility had not made him smaller. It had made him human again. "Is it too much?" he asked. I looked at him. No. His shoulders eased. "I wanted people to know the truth," he said. "Not just about ownership, about where this company came from." I turned toward him. "And do you know where it came from?" He looked at the photo of Robert. "Yes," he said. "From love, work, fear, hope, and people who gave more than they ever asked back." My throat tightened. That morning, the company held a small ceremony. Not a gala, no chandeliers, no champagne towers, no reporters invited to polish anyone's image. Just employees. People who had stayed. People who had returned. People who had been hurt and were still deciding whether to trust again. Charles Whitmore spoke first. He announced that the company had completed its culture restoration plan, reinstated retirement protections, corrected vendor review policies, and created a new Employee Dignity Council led by Monica Reed. Then Monica spoke. She did not praise Ethan too easily. I respected that. She said, "Repair is not proven by a speech. It is proven by patterns. Over the past year, we have begun to see better patterns." Ethan sat in the front row, listening with his hands folded. No defensiveness, no performance. When it was his turn, he walked to the front without notes. "I once believed leadership meant being admired," he said. "Then I lost admiration and had to ask whether there was anything underneath it." The room was silent. He looked toward me. "My mother taught me the answer. Not by rescuing me, but by refusing to let me stay cruel." Tears blurred my eyes. "I cannot undo the harm I caused," he continued. "But I can spend the rest of my life refusing to repeat it." Then he stepped away from the microphone. No dramatic applause followed. Just a quiet, honest standing ovation that rose slowly, one person at a time. Tyler stood first. Then Harold Pierce. Then the woman from finance. Then Monica. Finally, Charles. I remained seated for a moment, overwhelmed by the sight of my son receiving not worship, but earned respect. Then I stood too. Ethan saw me and lowered his head. After the ceremony, he walked me through the building. He introduced me to employees not as a symbol, not as an image, but as his mother. "This is Lila Alexander," he said each time. "My mother. One of the reasons this company exists." Each introduction healed something small. Not everything, but enough. Later, we returned to Ohio together. Ethan had asked to finish painting the porch railing, and I had told him the job was still waiting. He laughed and said, "Good, so am I." That afternoon, under a warm spring sky, My son stood on my porch in old jeans and a faded sweatshirt, brushing fresh white paint over weathered wood. I sat in a chair nearby, shelling peas into a bowl. "You missed a spot," I said. He turned, mock-offended. "I'm a former CEO mom, and apparently still not a professional painter." He laughed, a real laugh. The kind I remembered from before life taught him to impress strangers. When the railing was finished, he sat beside me on the porch steps. For a while, neither of us spoke. The sun lowered behind the trees. A neighbor's dog barked in the distance. The house looked small, old, and beautiful. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the silver compass. The lid was worn now from being opened so often. "I keep it with me," he said. "I know." He smiled. "Of course you do." The needle trembled, then settled north. "I used to think home was something you outgrew," he said. "Now I think it's something you have to become worthy of returning to." I looked at him. "You were always allowed to return," I said. "But yes, you had to become worthy of staying." He nodded. "I'm still working on that." "So am I admitted. He turned to me, surprised. "I had to learn, too," I said. "I had to learn that loving you did not mean protecting you from every consequence. Sometimes love has to stand still and let truth do its work." His eyes softened. "I'm glad you did," he whispered. I reached for his hand. His fingers closed around mine the way they had when he was little, crossing busy streets, trusting me to guide him safely to the other side. Only now we were both older. Both changed. Both still learning. That night after dinner, Ethan washed the dishes while I dried them. He did not complain about the old sink or the creaking floor. He did not glance at his phone every few minutes. He simply stood beside me, sleeves rolled up, doing ordinary work in an ordinary kitchen. And somehow, that felt like the greatest miracle of all. Before he left, he paused at the door. "Mom, yes, I love you." Not rushed, not automatic, not said to escape guilt. Said like a promise. "I love you too, Ethan." He hugged me then. Not carefully, not politely, but fully, like a son who had finally remembered that his mother was not part of his past. She was the reason he had a future. After he drove away, I stood on the porch and looked at the fresh white railing shining softly in the moonlight. For years I thought justice would feel like proving my son wrong, but it didn't. Justice felt like watching him become right again. And healing did not come all at once. It came in small things: a sincere apology, a repaired porch, a company choosing dignity, a son learning to look at his mother's old clothes and finally see the love stitched into every seam. Sometimes the people we love most forget the cost of the life they enjoy. They see old clothes, tired hands, simple homes, and quiet sacrifices, but they do not see the years of love hidden underneath them. Lila's story reminds us that dignity does not come from expensive suits, powerful titles, or shining buildings. True dignity comes from gratitude. It comes from remembering who stood beside us before the world knew our name. A mother's love can be patient, but it should never be treated as weakness. Love can forgive, but it should not excuse cruelty. And sometimes, the strongest thing a parent can do is stop rescuing a grown child from the truth. Ethan did not heal because he kept his power. He healed because he lost the illusion that power made him better than others. He had to fall low enough to remember the hands that lifted him in the first place. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. Do you think Lila did the right thing by letting Ethan face the consequences? Have you ever seen someone change after being humbled by life? Please like this video, subscribe for more emotional family stories, and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every comment, and your stories matter more than you know.